You're listening to Late Night Radio on the SHR Media Network. Caution, there will be mature themes explored and potentially adult language used. If conservatarian words, phrases, certain concepts, or rhetoric offends you, tune out now.
Freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. We didn't pass it on to our children in the bloodstream. The only way they can inherit the freedom we have known is if we fight for it, protect it, defend it, and then hand it to them with the well-taught lessons of how they in their lifetime must do the same. And if you and I don't do this, then you and I may well spend our sunset years telling our children and our children's children what it once was like in America when men were free.
I have come here to chew bubble gum and kick ass. And I'm all out of bubble.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages. That's a little hot. Let's turn that down. And I'm deaf, so let's turn up the cans. You know, the cans. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, welcome to BZ's Berserk Bobcat Saloon radio show, where I am live and direct, and we're going to have... Do I have it up? Don't, doggone it, I didn't put it up. Well, you're at SHRmedia.com. You're listening to the SHR Media Network. We are conservative media done right, and I am BZ. We're going to have a live debate kind of shindig for the VP, for the Vice President. That's going to be starting at the top of the hour. It's about, first, I should say, it's October 1st. The year of our Lord 2024, and I love doing stuff like this. Some people like it, some people don't, but I really enjoy having a whole bunch of good guests and friends on to do a debate. Now, we did this for the presidential debate, and shoot, we went on for 3 hours on that thing. I don't know if this is necessarily going to go longer or shorter, but I am glad that everybody is here. Wow, by the way, you can jump into our sumptuous and palatial and resplendent chat room on Rumble. Go to rumble.com, go into BZ's Berserk Bobcat Saloon radio show, click listen live. And that means you can chat there. There are great people in chat. So that's for this. And also, you can go to and listen to this as well. You can go to SHRmedia.com. Go to SHRmedia.com. We are conservative media done right. You can listen to it there. I think I'm missing some places. You can listen to it on Twitter. We got about 10 minutes before we're going to go. So let me introduce the act you've known for all these years. Here is Sackhead Sean. U.S. presidents must at the bare minimum embody the moral fabric. Stop. I got something else going here. And how am I ever going to find that? So, here. Okay. Now I've got things going. Sackhead Sean, does that surprise you?
No, God, no.
Okay.
No. So I fully expected it, if we're being honest. Fully expected it.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'll be here.
I'm just here to help.
Tip your waitress or tip your waiter. And of course, it's the saloon. Make sure you tip your bartender. So wait a minute. Let's get this right here. In the upper right, we have Sackhead Sean, host of Edge of Liberty. And down here, we have Big E Jackson, host of Mission Ready Men. And with luck, crossed phalanges, we'll have Lonnie Poindexter also into the saloon. We have a debate for you tonight, the vice presidential debate. Before we do that, though, however, I want to give props where props are due. So do you do and do who do, Sean, that voodoo like you do? What?
Sure.
So anyway, tell people who you are and tell people about your show, senor.
Oh, well, I wasn't expected to be put on the spot.
Oh, come on. Yeah, you were. Go.
No, after years of sackheads and taking a couple years off, I'm back hosting the Hedge of Liberty every Monday through Friday on the SHR Media Network. Also doing some live stuff, obviously with the debates and covering some live events as they happen. We're hoping to do more of that. Yeah, and then I am the victim of technology by this, and by that I mean I understand technology, and because of that I end up doing everything technologically behind the scenes.
Everything?
With most things.
Okay, let's give credit where
All right.
due. All right, most of it.
Yeah, I mean, you started with let's give credit where it's due, so I thought I'd take it, and then you suddenly try to steal it from me.
Run with the football. Sure, I get it. And then, of course,
one of us will be on this earth longer.
In this end of the ring, we have Earl Jackson, who has been with us a number of times before. Earl, if you would kindly tell us a little bit about yourself and Mission Ready Men, please.
Well, it's excuse me, it's good to be here again. I can't wait to see JD mop the floor with Tampon Tim. I have a little show I do on YouTube and Rumble called Mission Ready Men. Excuse me. And I used to have a show called Liberty Cast, and it was all political all the time, all conservative politics. But now with Mission Ready Men, I do mostly conservative politics, but I come at it from a Christian perspective and how men need to step up and step into their roles as Christians so that we can take this country back.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Is it? I'm sorry. It's pronounced Earl, is it? I just obviously not knowing you. I just want to make sure I don't get it wrong.
Okay. Yep, you got it. You got it.
Okay, good.
So what that means by doing that is you force me, Sean, to do the same thing that I do every show. A long time ago, and Earl is already laughing because he knows where I'm going with this. Okay, a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, I'm diddling around on the internet and I go, hey, look, there's this cool guy who happens to be this guy, Earl Jackson. So I come across his Facebook page and social media, and then I contact Earl Jackson, one each. You look like you'd be an interesting cat to have on the show. He agrees. I come on the show. At the end of the show, now this is in the old SHR Media Studios in downtown Sacramento, which is where Sean is right now. So at the end of the show, I said, God, I just had a great show with this cool dude named Earl Jackson. And we talked about this, we talked about that. And then Sean says, oh, yeah, I worked with Earl with the police. And yeah, I know Earl real well. Pause. Yeah, thanks for telling me. Appreciate it.
You didn't ask.
It never gets old.
Yeah, no, it never gets old. That's
what is it's almost like the edge of the end of oh God, with Kevin Spacey. What's the movie where they're all criminals?
Oh, Usual Suspects?
Yep. Where we were just playing everybody right to the end. We all knew what was going on. Nobody else did, and it kind of made us laugh. And I don't see why there's anything wrong with that.
So let me ask you guys this. Earl already verbalized this, and I kind of think I know where this is going anyway. But Earl and Sean, I suspect, as apparently you do, that this is going to be an entirely different debate. What do you guys think?
Yeah. No, I do. I agree. I think it's going to be silly.
Silly.
Yeah. I think it's going to be silly in the sense that I don't think Tim Walz is a serious enough person to debate for an extended period of time. Now, do I think he's going to be out there cracking one-liners? I think he's going to try. I think he is going to come off as the person they are trying to portray him as hokey, everyday guy, that goofy sense of humor. Like they try to play him up as the coach. Oh, it's the coach. They try to do all of that, and I think he's going to try to play into that. But as we know, that is not his real personality. which is why you get him acting like Richard Simmons when he's in a public space every chance that he gets, dancing around, waving rocket kicks whenever he gets in a line and holds somebody's hand. By the way, there was a picture of Tim and Gwen Waltz that was going around on the internet where they're sitting next to each other, eating, and somebody said they look like the couple in a horror movie that picks you up and drives with you, and you think they're totally fine until you get back to their house and they're cannibals.
Right, in their dungeon, in their house of horrors, right?
Yeah, and you, I hate to say it, if the shoe fits, Tim will kick it off. Go ahead, Earl.
Well, I think I have a slightly different view of it than you do, only because you're right. He's not a serious person. He's not a good debater. But I think what's going to happen is they're going to do the same thing that they did with Kamala Harris, because he has a quote that I saw on CNN where he's talking about his debate prep, and he says, as teachers, we're trained to answer the question, and we train our students to answer the questions. That's not how this goes. So they've already telegraphed that he's not going to be answering any questions. And so all I hope is that J.D. Vance brings up all the relevant stuff and hits him with it and hammers him with it like he did with Tim, whatever his name is, in his Senate campaign. I can't remember his name.
Yeah, I can't remember his name either.
So you think, let me paraphrase this. You tell me if I've got you right. You think that Tim Waltz, Tim Pon, is going to he's going to try to replicate the Kamala Harris campaign and just obfuscate and just purposely, and apparently that's the strategy, don't answer any questions. Is that what I've got you thinking?
I think that's his plan, and I think that the debate moderators are in on it, as they always are.
Yeah, I'll agree with that. Yeah. And here's why I don't know if that's going to be the case per se. The woman who's running for, what was it, Senate in Michigan, coming out and saying that Kamala is not doing as well as they had hoped. Tim Waltz himself is not polling great. You got to remember, these debates are to sell to independents. Literally, early voting started, right? So this debate's kind of a throwaway anyhow, but the few independent voters in swing states that this debate is actually for is who he's trying to win over. I don't think he is going to be able to intellectually engage, even if it's words that he's learned by rote to be able to regurgitate, which is what Kamala did. You go back and listen to all of her speeches. They were pre-written, memorized paragraphs. And you could tell because it's the only time that she spoke, and she had the dry mouth, all of her mannerisms, but she also didn't sound like a goober when she spoke. That's the first time that it happened from the time she decided she was going to run, or they had the coup against Joe. So I don't know if they're going to be able to pull that off to the American people. I mean, obviously the commentators are going to be in the bag for them, but I don't know if the American people will be able to tolerate that, I guess is a better word.
That'll be very interesting. I'm trying to set up the debate right now, and I can't stream it exactly live. I've got to pause just a little bit, but I want to go into the rules. I'm looking at the rules over here. The debate will be 90 minutes with 2 commercial breaks. The 2 seated moderators will be the only people asking questions. There's no audience. The coin flip was held virtually on Tuesday, September 3rd to determine podium placement, order of closing statements. So it's going to be very similar to the way it was last time. The mics, I believe, are going to be open this time. However, I believe the moderators have said, well, if things get out of control, we might have to do something about that.
I don't think things will get out of control.
They'll be able to make them at their discretion.
Yeah, it'll be very similar. But SHR Media says, "Hola, listeners. Hola, cuital."
I didn't know that if I clicked on comments, it would show. That's fun to have.
Yep. Let me see if I can dial this in. Shoot, I want to make it
Looking for a
bigger.
way to stretch the dollar?
Oh, shut up.
Okay. I mean, you
No,
invited
not-
me on the show, but if you want me to shut up, that's
No,
fine. I can shut up.
no. So I had
This
this all
one
set
thing
up.
about me, Doc, is I can shut up.
I know. So you guys hold hands, play nicely in the room while I try to figure out a proper stream for this thing. Sean, go ahead, take it.
Oh, perfect. So, Earl, we're obviously, as we're getting ready for this debate, or early voting started. What do you see? Do you see any upsets coming up in the upcoming election? I mean, we've all been watching polls for years. We kind of, I don't feel like the Democrats have it as cut and dry as they're trying to say. I also fear the whole red wave debacle that happened last time. I know that potential is always there. Without the word steal, because we all know that's a whole show. We could have a whole 4 hours, 5, 6, 7, 12, 14 hours on. Is there anything that's surprising you right now going into, I don't know, what are we, a month and 4 days from the election?
I got to tell you, the one thing that really surprises me is how far behind Carrie Lake in Arizona is polling. I'm looking at it right now, and she's, according to Emerson, she's down by 11 points, which I
Carrie
find
Lake?
amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Wow.
And I've been seeing that. I've been seeing that all along, and I just don't understand it. I really don't. And I mean, 11 points is a big enough lead to where, a big enough deficit to where it's hard to imagine that that's just cheating.
Oh no, I agree with you. I'm shocked by those numbers too. But I also remind everybody Hillary was up by, I don't know what, infinity points like a month
at
before
least
the
90.
election. Yeah. I mean, it was at one point, it
Yeah.
legitimately, like 3 weeks before the election, she was what, 73% polling to 30 or
Was it that
27
high?
or something. Yeah, it was ridiculously high. But yeah, so I can see that in the state. You look at numbers out of Nevada, they've been fluctuating like crazy in that senatorial race. Same thing out of Montana, and it'll be interesting down ballot, which is getting no attention from the media again, and is just as consequential this time around, as we all know. And
that's to that region over the past year to try to prevent a regional war.
Sorry about that.
that's all right. I think one of the things too is a lot of people don't. Carrie Lake, I think, will suffer a little bit of the same way that Donald Trump suffers in polling. Is people still won't admit that they're voting for Trump. That is something that has happened repeatedly,
Yeah.
and we saw that last time. We saw that the original, and we're still seeing it now. I'll tell you, I firmly believe that there are plenty of
Israel and its
people of
proxies.
color who are not sitting here and being polled. They're like, oh yeah, no, I'm going to vote for Trump, right? Because there's still that whole I'm not supposed to vote for him. The church will hate me. That my friends will hate me. My neighbors will hate me. Blah 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 blah. So I always add in a percentage to that. I did last election too. And I think that's legitimately 3% right there. And Carrie Lake is a very Trump-like figure in Arizona, where people, I think, like her a lot more than they admit they like her.
So it's all about the polls and
it's all why polls suck.
People trying to intimate that they have polls. Okay, I think I've got.
Well, the other thing you got to keep in mind is that it's been pretty well established that they are underrepresenting conservatives, likely voters, things like that.
Yeah.
Which is another reason why Trump isn't as far ahead as you would think he would be, considering the state of the country right now.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I think there's serious sampling issues. There always has been. I think they always oversample Democrats and they always undersample conservatives, and they minimally sample independents, which are going to be who actually decides this. Are we ready to go?
I think we're just about, if I can get this to look over here. And I'm going to do an additional present here. And I think we're ready to roll. Here we go.
Along with our Israeli partners and our coalition, able to stop the incoming attack. But what's fundamental here is that steady leadership is going to matter. It's clear, and the world saw it on that debate stage a few weeks ago, a nearly 80-year-old Donald Trump talking about crowd sizes is not what we need in this moment. But it's not just that. It's those that were closest to Donald Trump that understand how dangerous he is when the world is this dangerous. His chief of staff, John Kelly, said that he was the most flawed human being he'd ever.
I got one if you want, BZ.
Do you? Can you put it up? Because CNN is not letting me do this right now. Okay, hit it.
They use it to buy weapons that they're now launching against our allies, and God forbid, potentially tonight over the next.
Sorry, it skipped forward to.
Convince you tonight.
That's right.
Minutes that if we get better leadership in the White House, if we get Donald Trump back in the White House, the American dream is going to be attainable once again. Now, to answer this particular question, we have to remember that as much as Governor Walz just accused Donald Trump of being an agent of chaos, Donald Trump actually delivered stability in the world, and he did it by establishing effective deterrence. People were afraid of stepping out of line. Iran, which launched this attack, has received over $100 billion in unfrozen assets thanks to the Kamala Harris administration. What do they use that money for? They use it to buy weapons that they're now launching against our allies, and God forbid, potentially launching against the United States as well. Donald Trump recognized that for people to fear the United States, you needed peace through strength. They needed to recognize that if they got out of line, the United States global leadership would put stability and peace back in the world. Now, you asked about a preemptive strike, Margaret, and I want to answer the question. Look,
he should have added the easing of sanctions or the lack of enforcement gave Iran more money.
Support our allies wherever they are when they're fighting the bad guys. I think that's the right approach to take with the Israel question.
Thank you, Senator. Governor Walz, do you care to respond to any of the allegations?
Well, look, Donald Trump was in office. We'll sometimes hear a revisionist history, but when Donald Trump was in office, it was Donald Trump who we had a coalition of nations that had boxed Iran's nuclear program in, the inability to advance.
No, it didn't.
Donald Trump
Jesus
program and put nothing else in its place. So Iran is closer to a nuclear weapon than they were before because of Donald Trump's.
Everybody forgets the Iran deal had no teeth to it. There was no enforcement ability. There was no teeth in that deal whatsoever. They were doing it anyways.
It was one-sided.
And when Iranian missiles did fall near U.S. troops and they received traumatic brain injuries, Donald Trump wrote it off as headaches. Look, our allies understand that Donald Trump is fickle. He will go to whoever has the most flattery or where it makes sense to him. Steady leadership like you witnessed today, like you witnessed in April. Both Iranian attacks were repelled. Our coalition is strong, and we need the steady leadership that Kamala Harris is providing.
Senator Vance, the U.S. did have a diplomatic deal with Iran to temporarily pause
Zero
parts of its
teeth in that
nuclear program, and President
and
Trump
they were
exit
caught
that deal.
Still producing
He recently
several
said,
times.
just 5 days ago, the U.S. must now make
On those
a
occasions when they
diplomatic
actually
deal
let
with
the
Iran because
inspectors
the
in.
consequences
Right.
are impossible. Did he make a mistake? You have 1 minute.
Well, first of all, Margaret, diplomacy is not a dirty word, but I think that's something that Governor Walz just said is quite extraordinary. You yourself just said Iran is as close to a nuclear weapon today as they have ever been. And Governor Walz, you blame Donald Trump. Who has been the vice president for the last 3.5 years? And the answer is your running mate, not mine. Donald Trump consistently made the world more secure. Now, we talk about what the sequence of events that led us to where we are right now, and you can't ignore October the 7th, which I appreciate Governor Walz bringing up. But when did Iran and Hamas and their proxies attack Israel? It was during the administration of Kamala Harris. So Governor Walz can criticize Donald Trump's tweets, but effective, smart diplomacy and peace through strength is how you bring stability back to a very broken world.
Yeah, we also had the Abraham Accord. The Middle East was peaceful. They don't like to admit that. The Middle East was peaceful.
I'm 40 years old. When was the last time that an American president didn't have a major conflict break out? The only answer is during the 4 years that Donald Trump was president.
Yeah.
Gentlemen, we have a
Thank
lot
you.
to get
Yes.
to. Nora? Margaret,
Give you
thank
2
you.
minutes.
That was solid.
Let's
So
turn now
let's
to
start with
Hurricane
the
Helene.
hurricane, because
The
it's an
storm could
unbelievable
become one of the deadliest on record. More than 160 people are dead and hundreds more are missing. Scientists say climate change makes these hurricanes larger, stronger,
That's because they get
and
paid to.
more deadly because of the historic rainfall. Senator Vance, according to CBS News polling, 7 in 10 Americans and more than 60% of Republicans under the age of 45 favor the U.S. taking steps to try and reduce climate change. Senator, what responsibility would the Trump administration have to try
I
and
don't buy that
reduce
number at all.
the impact of climate change? I'll give you 2 minutes.
Sure. So first of all, let's start with the hurricane, because it's an unbelievable, unspeakable human tragedy. I just saw today actually a photograph of 2 grandparents on a roof with a 6-year-old child, and it was the last photograph ever taken of them because the roof collapsed and those innocent people lost their lives. And I'm sure Governor Walz joins me in saying our hearts go out to those innocent people, our prayers go out to them, and we want as robust and aggressive as a federal response as we can get to save as many lives as possible, and then of course afterwards to help
Have they
the
even
people
declared a
in
state
those
of
communities
emergency yet?
rebuild. I mean, these are communities that I love. Some of them I
I
know
think
very
they
personally.
did,
In
but
Appalachia,
only
all across the
today.
Southeast. They
Yeah.
They're
need
getting
their
everything
government
they
to
can.
do their
Joe told
job.
us.
And I commit that when Donald Trump is president again, the government will put the citizens of this country first when they suffer from a disaster. And Nora, you asked about climate change. I think this is a very important issue. Look, a lot of people are justifiably worried about all these crazy weather patterns. I think it's important for us, first of all, to say, Donald Trump and I support clean air, clean water. We want the environment to be cleaner and safer. But one of the things that I've noticed some of our Democratic friends talking a lot about is a concern about carbon emissions, this idea that carbon emissions drives all of the climate change. Well, let's just say that's true, just for the sake of argument, so we're not arguing about weird science. Let's just say that's true. Well, if you believe that, what would you want to do? The answer is that you'd want to reshore as much American manufacturing as possible, and you'd want to produce as much energy as possible in the United States of America, because we're the cleanest
Good
economy in
answer.
the entire world.
Yeah.
What have Kamala Harris's policies actually led to?
I don't agree,
More
but if I
energy
did, this
production in
is what we
China,
would do.
more manufacturing
that.
overseas,
Yeah.
more doing business in some of the dirtiest parts of the entire world. And when I say that, I mean
Can you pause
the
that?
amount of carbon emissions they're doing per unit of economic output. So if we actually
Okay, just like last time, dry mouth, you look for physical manifestations of people. Look at Vance and look at the tenseness on Waltz over there. Just an
Yeah.
observation.
I'll tell you though, I agree with you what you're saying. I see what you're saying. I don't know if this is Tim Waltz uncomfortable. I don't know if Tim Waltz knows how to be uncomfortable, because he is so uncomfortable as a human.
He is, but I mean, the point is, look at the difference in front of your face between
Well, yeah.
Vance and Waltz. Please continue.
Yeah.
No, I see what you're saying.
The technology that we invented and making it here. 200,000 jobs across the country. The largest solar manufacturing plant in North America sits in Minnesota. But my farmers know climate change is real. They've seen 500-year droughts, 500-year floods back to back. But what they're doing is adapting, and this has allowed them to tell me, look, I harvest corn, I harvest soybean, and I harvest wind. We are producing more natural gas and more oil at any time than we ever have. We're also producing more clean energy.
No, we're not.
So the solution for us is to continue to move forward, that climate change is real. Reducing our impact is absolutely critical, but this is not a false choice. You can do that at the same time you're creating the jobs that we're seeing all across the country. That's exactly what this administration has done. We are seeing us becoming an energy superpower for the future, not just the current. And that's what
Those jobs are
absolutely
all
makes
fake.
sense. And then we start thinking about,
And how do those
mitigate
jobs
these
lower the price of
disasters?
everything
Thank you.
because
Senator,
fuel
I
is
want to give you an
expensive?
opportunity
Yeah,
to
and they
respond there.
don't.
The governor mentioned that President Trump has called climate change a hoax. Do you agree?
Well, look, what the president has said is that if the Democrats, in particular Kamala Harris and her leadership, if they really believe that climate change is serious, what they would be doing is more manufacturing and more energy production in the United States of America, and that's not
And
what they're
calling
doing.
out China
But
and
clearly,
India.
Kamala Harris
Yes.
herself doesn't believe her own rhetoric
Repeatedly.
on this. If she did, she would actually agree with Donald Trump's energy policies. Now, something Governor Walz said I think is important to touch upon, because when we talk about clean energy, I think that's a slogan that often the
Waltz
Democrats Democrats
like a
will
Saint
use here.
Bernard watching
I'm
the
talking, of
owner
course,
walk
about the
with the tree.
Democratic leadership. And the real issue is that if you're spending hundreds of millions or even billions of dollars of American taxpayer money on solar panels that are made in China, number one, you're going to make the economy dirtier. We should be making more of those solar panels here in the United States of America. Some of them are, Tim, but a lot of them are being made overseas in China, especially the components that go into those solar panels. So if you really want to make the environment cleaner, you've got to invest in more energy production. We haven't built a nuclear facility, I think, one in the past 40 years. Natural gas, we got to invest more in it. Kamala Harris has done the opposite. That's raised energy prices and also meant that we're doing worse by the climate.
Senator, your time is up. Governor, would you like to respond?
Well, look, we're producing more natural gas than we ever have. There's no moratorium on that. We're producing more oil, but the folks know. And
no, we're not.
Like I said,
no, we're not.
These are not liberal folks. These are not folks that are Green New Deal folks. These are farmers that have been drought one year, massive flooding the next year. They understand that it makes sense.
That's called weather.
Our number one export cannot be topsoil from erosion from these massive storms. We saw it in Minnesota
or
this
something
summer.
in the Midwest for
thinking about how do we respond to that. We're thinking ahead on this. And what Kamala Harris has been able to do in Minnesota, we're starting to weatherproof some of these things. The infrastructure law that was passed allows us to think about mitigation in the
Green
future.
New Deal.
How do we make sure that we're protecting by burying our power lines? How do we make sure that we're protecting lakefronts and things that we're seeing more and more of?
Burying
to
power.
call it a hoax and to take the oil company executives
Look at JD. Look at him.
say,
Look at
give me money
Vance.
for my campaign and I'll let you do whatever you want. We can be smarter about that. And an all above energy policy is exactly what she's doing, creating those jobs right here.
All
Governor,
those
your time
solar
is up. The
companies
overwhelming
are
consensus
paying
among
into the Harris
scientists is that the Earth's
campaign.
climate is warming at an unprecedented rate. Margaret.
Thank you, Nora. We're going to turn now to immigration. The crisis at the U.S.-Mexico border consistently ranks as one of the top issues for American voters. Senator Vance, your campaign is pledging to carry out the largest mass deportation plan in American history and to use the U.S. military to do so. Could you be more specific about exactly how this will work? For example, would you deport parents who have entered the U.S. illegally and separate them from any of their children who were born on U.S. soil? You have 2 minutes.
So first of all, Margaret, before we talk about deportations, we have to stop the bleeding. We have a historic immigration crisis because Kamala Harris started and said that she wanted to undo all of Donald Trump's border policies. 94 executive orders, suspending deportations, decriminalizing illegal aliens, massively increasing the asylum fraud that exists in our system. That has opened the floodgates. And what it's meant is that a lot of fentanyl is coming into our country. I had a mother who struggled with opioid addiction and has gotten clean. I don't want people who are struggling with addiction to be deprived of their second chance because Kamala Harris let in fentanyl into our communities at record levels. So you've got to stop the bleeding. You've got to re-implement Donald Trump's border policies, build the wall, re-implement deportations. And that gets me to your point, Margaret, about what do we actually do? So we've got 25 million illegal aliens who are here in the country. What do we do with them? I think the first thing that we do is we start with the criminal migrants. About 1 million of those people have committed some form of crime in addition to crossing the border illegally. I think you start with deportations on those folks. And then I think you make it harder for illegal aliens to undercut the wages of American workers. A lot of people will go home if they can't work for less than minimum wage in our own country. And by the way, that'll be really good for our workers who just want to earn a fair wage for doing a good day's work. And the final point, Margaret, is you ask about family separation. Right now in this country, Margaret, we have 320,000 children that the Department of Homeland Security has effectively lost. Some of them have been sex trafficked. Some of them hopefully are at homes with their families. Some of them have been used as drug trafficking mules. The real family separation policy in this country is unfortunately Kamala Harris's wide open southern border. And I'd ask my fellow Americans to remember when she came into office, she said she was going to do this. Real leadership would be saying, you know what, I screwed up. We're going to go back to Donald Trump's border policies. I wish that she would do that. It would be good for all of us.
I love that answer.
Governor,
Yeah.
do you care to respond to any of those specific allegations, including that the vice president is, quote, letting in fentanyl and using kids as drug mules, among other things regarding children.
The drug mule is not true, but I will say about this, about the
Bullshit.
How do you know?
The opioid crisis, and the good news on this is the last 12 months saw the largest decrease in opioid deaths in our state.
You don't know where the kids are. How can you say it's not true?
Ohio, but there's still more work to do. But let's go back to this on immigration. Kamala Harris was the Attorney General of the largest state, a border state in California. She's the only person in this race who prosecuted transnational gangs for human trafficking and drug conventions.
Transsexual.
But look, we all want to solve this. Most of us want to solve this, and that is the United States Congress. That's the Border Patrol agents. That's the Chamber of Commerce. That's most Americans out here. That's why we had the fairest and the toughest bill
the Chamber of Commerce have to
immigration that
The
this nation
Chamber of
seen.
Commerce
It
is
was
big on
drafted by
deportation, apparently.
Conservative senator from Oklahoma, James Langford. I know him. He's super conservative, but he's a man of principle, wants to get it done. Democrats and Republicans worked on this piece of legislation. The Border Patrol said this is what we need in here. These are the experts. And
It
the
had
Chamber of
nothing to
Commerce
do
and
with
Wall
the
Street
border.
Journal said, pass this thing. Kamala Harris helped.
Same
get
way
the
as the Green New Deal
1,500 new border
or
agents. Detection for
Recovery Act
drugs.
was a Green New Deal.
DOJ
Nothing
money.
about
I
that.
lost
The other
all
one.
respect for Langford after
the
that.
adjudications on this.
Because
Just
he
what
was
America
touting it.
wants. But as soon as I was getting ready to pass and actually tackle this, Donald Trump said no, told them to vote against it because it gives him a campaign issue. It gives him to, what would Donald Trump talk about if we actually...
Is there any evidence of that? I keep hearing them say that. Is there any evidence of that whatsoever?
No, and how come they only started to address the border when Trump started talking about it?
Donald Trump had 4 years.
And then there's
4
that.
years to do this. And he promised you, America, how easy it would be.
He
I'll
had
build
it
you a
locked
big,
down.
Beautiful
He
wall.
did.
And Mexico will pay
Again.
for it. Less than 2% of that wall got built, and Mexico didn't
Unchallenged.
pay a dime. But
Completely
here we are now,
unchallenged.
9 years after he came
By
down
the
that
And the
escalator,
border was still secure despite that.
dehumanizing
Imagine
Yeah.
if they hadn't
and telling him
blocked
what he
him
was
at every
going to
turn
do.
to get
As
that
far
wall
as the
built.
deportation plan, at one
How
point,
come they don't talk
Senator
about the
Vance
fact
said
that the
it was so
caravan
unworkable to be
started the
laughable.
day Joe
So
Biden
that's where we're
won
at.
the
Pass
election,
the bill.
allegedly?
She'll sign it.
Governor,
And
your
that's when
time
they
is up.
started coming up from the
Senator,
South
the
because
question
that
was, will
entire
you separate
campaign, he was
parents from their
talking about
children,
easing
even if their
restrictions
kids
at
are U.S.
the border.
citizens? You have 1 minute.
Exactly.
In one of the
My
debates, he
point is that
actually
we already
said,
have
"Come
massive
on
child
in."
separations thanks to
Yes.
Kamala Harris's open border. And I didn't accuse Kamala Harris of inviting drug mules. I said that she enabled the Mexican drug cartels to operate freely in this country. And we know that they use children as drug mules, and it is a disgrace, and it has to stop. Look, I think what Tim said just doesn't pass the smell test. For 3 years, Kamala Harris went out bragging that she was going to undo Donald Trump's border policy. She did exactly that. We had a record number of illegal crossings. We had a record number of fentanyl coming into our country. And now that she's running for president, or a few months before, she says that somehow she got religion and cared a lot about a piece of legislation. The only thing
so
that
weird.
she
How can you
did
tell?
when she became the vice president, when she became the appointed border czar, was to
Look at him.
undo 94
He looks like he's
Donald
about to
Trump
bark at
executive
J.D.
actions
Vance, and
that
not yell
opened
at.
the
I mean,
border.
legitimately
This
start
problem
barking.
is leading to massive problems in the United States of America. Parents who can't afford health care, schools that are overwhelmed. It's got to stop, and it will when Donald Trump is president.
What do you see,
Senator,
boy? Is
your
Timmy
time
stuck in a
is
well?
up. Governor,
Oh, yeah. Boy, is he.
our CBS News polling, which does show that a majority of Americans, more than 50%, support mass deportations.
There you go. Thank
Fix
you.
this issue with a
Wow,
bill
they-
that is
they actually-
necessary.
they
but the
made a real
issue on
statement.
this is what
I'm
happens when you don't
shocked.
want to solve it. You demonize it. And we saw this. And Senator Vance, and it surprises me on this, talking about and saying, I will create stories to bring attention to this. That vilified a large number of people who were here legally in the community of Springfield.
So people
The
are too
Republican
stupid, and that's
governor
why they support it,
said,
because they
"It's not
demonized it.
true.
They're
Don't
not
do it."
smart.
There's
That's
consequences
what he's
for this.
saying.
There's consequences. We could
Yep.
come together. Senator Langford did it. We could come together and solve
Stop
this
talking to me
if we
about
didn't
Langford.
let Donald Trump continue to make it an issue.
Yeah, I
And the
lost all respect for
consequences
that
in
guy.
Springfield were
Tell me
the
how
governor had
Kinzinger
to
is great
send
too while you're at it.
state law enforcement to escort kindergartners to school. I believe Senator Vance
Swalwell.
wants to solve this,
He's
but by
wonderful.
standing with
Oh,
Donald
goodness.
Trump and not working together to find a solution, it becomes a talking point. And when it becomes a talking point like this, we dehumanize
I
and
believe
villainize
Senator
other human
Vance
beings.
wants to solve this. Okay.
Tim,
Governor,
it's- it-
Governor, your time is up. Senator, I'll give you 1 minute, but let me just ask you the question first. The governor has made the point, and I think as a sitting lawmaker, you know that Congress controls the purse strings and any funding. So you have said repeatedly that Donald Trump would, through executive action, solve this. Do you disagree that Congress controls the purse strings and would need to support many of the changes that you would actually want to implement? You have 1 minute.
Look, Margaret, first of all, the gross majority of what we need to do at the southern border is just empowering law enforcement to do their job. I've been to the southern border more than our borders are. Kamala Harris has been. And it's actually heartbreaking because the Border Patrol agents, they just want to be empowered to do their job. Of course, additional resources would help, but most of this is about the president and the vice president empowering our law enforcement to say, if you try to come across the border illegally, you've got to stay in Mexico. You've got to go back through proper channels. Now, Governor Walz brought up the community of Springfield, and he's very worried about the things that I've said in Springfield. Look, in Springfield, Ohio, and in communities all across this country, you've got schools that are overwhelmed. You've got hospitals that are overwhelmed. You have got housing that is totally unaffordable because we brought in millions of illegal immigrants to compete with Americans for scarce homes. The people that I'm most worried about in Springfield, Ohio, are the American citizens who have had their lives destroyed by Kamala Harris's open border. It is a disgrace, Tim. And I actually think, I agree with you. I think you want to solve this problem, but I don't think that Kamala Harris does.
Senator, your time is up. Governor, you have 1
No,
minute.
you said I don't think Kamala does.
That's intriguing. It is law enforcement that asked for the bill. They helped craft it. They're the ones that supported it.
Yeah, but then all the other shit got jammed into it. That's the point.
Look, this issue of continuing to bring this up, of not dealing with it, of blaming migrants for everything. Jesus. On housing, we could talk a little bit about Wall Street speculators.
Wasn't Tim Walz the one that joked about selling ladders to get over the wall when he was a governor?
Also gives the money necessary to adjudicate. I agree. It should not take 7 years for an asylum claim to be done. This bill gets it done in 90 days. Then you start to make a difference in this, and you start to adhere to what we know, American principles.
How many millions times 90 days each?
But Matthew 25:40 talks about
what they don't tell you, and I know this from a reliable source, is the amount of immigration judges they have is almost.
This bill does it. It's funded.
That's right.
It's
and I know how you know that.
And it lets us keep our dignity about how we treat other people.
Thank you,
They
Governor.
don't talk
And
about
just
that.
to clarify for our viewers, Springfield, Ohio does have a large number of Haitian migrants who have legal status, temporary protected status.
Well,
Nora?
Margaret, but
Thank you, Senator. We have so much to get to.
Margaret, I think it's important
We're
because
going to turn now to the
debate-
economy. Thank
Margaret,
you.
the rules were that
The
you guys
economy,
weren't going
we're-
to fact check, and since you're fact checking me, I think it's important to say what's actually going on. So there's an application called the CBP One app, where you can go on as an illegal migrant, apply for asylum or apply for parole, and be granted legal status at the wave of a Kamala Harris open border.
Look at him.
That
Look
is
at
not a
Walz.
person coming in, applying for a green card and waiting for 10 years. That
Thank
is
you,
the
Senator.
facilitation of illegal immigration, Margaret, by
Thank
our
you,
own
Senator, for
Nope.
describing
Margaret,
the legal
you-
process. We have so much to get to, Senator.
No, Margaret, you
We have
asked.
so
You made the
much-
statement.
Yeah. Yes.
You
Thank
broke
you,
the
gentlemen.
rule.
The
We
CBP
wanna have-
One app has not been on the books since 1990. It's something that Kamala Harris created, Margaret.
Gentlemen, the audience can't hear you because your mics are cut. We have so much we want to get to. Thank you for explaining the legal process. Nora.
Fox News debate.
The economy is a top concern
No
for
Brett Baird.
voters. Each of your campaigns has released an economic plan. So let's talk about the specifics.
SHR
Governor Walz,
debate.
Vice President Harris unveiled a plan
Damn
that
straight,
includes
mister.
billions in tax credits for manufacturing, housing, and a renewed child tax credit. The Wharton School says your proposals will increase the nation's deficit by $1.2 trillion. How would you pay for that without ballooning the deficit? Governor, I'll give you 2 minutes.
Yeah, thank you. And Kamala
They
Harris
both
and I
suck
do
on
believe in the
budgets.
middle class because that's where we come from. We both grew up in that. We understand. So those of you out there listening tonight, you're hearing a lot of stuff back and forth, and it's good. It's healthy. That's what this is supposed to happen. You should be listening. How's this going to impact me? The bold forward plan that Kamala Harris put out there is talking about this housing issue. The one thing is there's 3 million new houses proposed
This is
under
not
this
the
plan.
question to
with
the
down
answer that
payment
was asked.
assistance
No,
of
it is
1.
not the answer, dude.
A house is much more than just an asset to be traded somewhere. It's foundational to where you're at. And then making sure that the things you buy every day, whether they be prescription drugs or other things, that there's fairness in that.
The
Look,
question is, how are you going to
$35
pay
insulin is a good
1.5
thing,
trillion?
but it costs $5 to make insulin. They were charging $800 before this law went into effect. As far as the housing goes, I've seen it in Minnesota. 12% more houses in Minneapolis, prices went down on rent 4%. It's working. And then making sure tax cuts go to the middle class. $6,000 child tax credit, we have one in Minnesota, reduces childhood poverty by a third. We save money in the long run, and we do the right thing for families. And then getting businesses off the ground. The law as it stands right now is $5,000 tax credit for small business, increasing that to $50,000. Now, this is a philosophical difference between us. Donald Trump made a promise, and I'll give you this. He kept it. He took folks to Mar-a-Lago, said, you're rich as hell, I'm going to give you a tax cut. He gave the tax cuts that predominantly went to the top class. What happened there was an $8 trillion increase in the national debt, the largest ever. Now he's proposing a 20%
he just added the
or
COVID
sales
number into
tax
that
on everything we bring in.
He added the amount of money that we paid for COVID into that number. That's a bullshit number.
And potentially lead to a recession. Look, this is simple for you. Where are we going? Kamala Harris has said to do the things she wants to do. We'll just ask the wealthiest to pay their fair share. When you do that, our system works best. More people are participating in it, and folks have the things that they need.
Senator, I want to give you a moment to respond on that. But similarly, the Wharton School has done an analysis of the Trump plan and says it would increase the nation's deficit by $5.8 trillion. My question is the same for you. How do you pay for all that without ballooning the deficit? I'll give you 2 minutes.
Well, first of all, you're going to hear a lot from Tim Walz this evening, and you just heard it in the answer. A lot of what Kamala Harris proposes to do, and some of it, I'll be honest with you, it even sounds pretty good. Here's what you won't hear, is that Kamala Harris has already done it. Because she's been the vice president for 3.5 years. She had the opportunity to enact all of these great policies. And what she's actually done instead is drive the cost of food higher by 25%, drive the cost of housing higher by about 60%. Open the American southern border and make middle-class life unaffordable for a large number of Americans. If Kamala Harris has such great plans for how to address middle-class problems, then she ought to do them now. Not when asking for a promotion, but in the job the American people gave her 3.5 years ago. And the fact that she isn't tells you a lot about how much you can trust her actual plans. Now, Donald Trump's economic plan is not just a plan, but it's also a record. A lot of those same economists attack Donald Trump's plans, and they have PhDs, but they don't have common sense and they don't have wisdom. Because Donald Trump's economic policies delivered the highest take-home pay in a generation in this country, 1.5% inflation, and to boot, peace and security all over the world. So when people say that Donald Trump's economic plan doesn't make sense, I say, look at the record. He delivered rising take-home pay for American workers. Now, Tim admirably admits that they want to undo the Trump tax cuts. But if you look at what was so different about Donald Trump's tax cuts, even from previous Republican tax cut plans, is that a lot of those resources went to giving more take-home pay to middle-class and working-class Americans. It was passed in 2017, and you saw an American economic boom unlike we've seen in a generation in this country.
And it expires
that is a record that I'm proud to run on, and we're going to get back to that common sense wisdom so that you can afford to live the American dream again. I know a lot of you are struggling. I know a lot of you are worried about paying the bills. It's going to stop when Donald Trump brings back common sense to this country.
Governor, do you want to respond to that? What has Kamala Harris done for the middle class?
Yeah, well, Kamala Harris's day one was Donald Trump's failure on COVID that led to the collapse of our economy. We were already before COVID in a manufacturing recession, but 10 million people out of work, largest percentage.
We were not in a manufacturing recession.
9 million jobs closed on that.
There were jobs, manufacturing jobs are coming back to America before COVID did.
You said this. I've made a note of this. Economists can't be trusted. Science can't be trusted. National security folks can't be trusted.
The ones that are paid to certain people,
if you're going to be president, you don't have all the answers. Donald Trump believes he does. My pro tip of the day is this. If you need heart surgery, listen to the people at the Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota, not Donald Trump. And the same thing goes with this. And I ask you out there, teachers, nurses, truck drivers, whatever, how is it fair that you're paying your taxes every year and Donald Trump hasn't paid any federal tax in the last 15 years and the last year as president? That's what's wrong with the system. There's a way around it, and he's bragged about that.
Yeah, it's such a bunk statement. It is such a bunk statement. The worst part is when Hillary
experts for 40 years said that if we shipped our manufacturing base off to China, we'd get cheaper goods.
And when he tried that with Hillary, tried that on him. He turned around. He's like, "Yeah, that's because of the rules you guys have in place. All your friends do it too."
They were wrong about that.
So either way,
they were wrong about the idea that if we made America less self-reliant, less productive in our own nation, that it would somehow make us better off, and they were wrong about it.
Yeah, and
for
if while the
first time in a
manufacturer wasn't into
generation,
China,
Donald
guess
Trump
what?
had the
These
wisdom and the
strikes by the
courage to
longshoremen
say to
wouldn't
that
be hurting us so
bipartisan
bad.
consensus, we're not doing it anymore. We're bringing American manufacturing back. We're unleashing American energy. We're going to make more of our own stuff. And this isn't just an economic issue. I mean, I've got 3 beautiful little kids at home, 7, 4, and 2, and I love them very much, and I hope they're in bed right now. But look, so many of the drugs,
Tim's
the
writing that down.
pharmaceuticals that we put in the bodies of our
Kids
children
in
are
bed.
manufactured by nations that hate us. This has to stop, and we're not going to stop it by listening
Oh,
to
look,
experts.
he's mad because his
We're gonna
buddy, he
stop
just
it by
called out
listening to
China.
common sense wisdom, which is what Donald Trump governed on.
Senator, your time is up. Governor Walz, can you address that? I mean, voters say they trust Donald Trump on the economy more. Why?
Well, if you're listening tonight and you want billionaires to get tax cuts, you heard what the numbers were. Look, I'm a union guy on this. I'm not a guy who wanted to ship things overseas, but I understand that, look, we produce soybeans and corn. We need to have fair trading partners. That's something that we believe in. I think the thing that most concerns me on this is
there's a big
Donald
difference
Trump
between
was the guy
sending
who
manufacturing
created the
overseas
largest
and
trade
selling
deficit
corn
in American
overseas.
history with China.
That's not even.
So the rhetoric is good.
That's
Much
like
of what the
apples
senator
and
said right
dildos.
there,
It's
I'm in
not even the
agreement with
same
him on this. I
conversation.
watched it happen too. I watched it to my communities, and we talked about that. But we had people undercutting the right to collectively bargain. We had right to work states made it more difficult.
Wow.
We had companies that were willing
Thanks
to
for
ship
that,
it
Sean.
over, and we saw people profit. Folks that are venture capital
How
in some
far away
cases,
they
putting
were
money
from that
into
point.
companies
I
that were
mean,
overseas. We're in agreement that we bring those home. The issue is Donald Trump is talking about it. Kamala Harris has a record, 250,000 more manufacturing
they
jobs
haven't
just
done
in,
it
out of the
yet.
IRA.
May I respond to that?
Yes.
So appreciate that. So if you notice what Governor Walz just did is he said, first of all, Donald Trump has to listen to the experts. And then when he acknowledged that the experts screwed up, he said, well, Donald Trump didn't do nearly as good of a job as the statistics
No, that's a
show
gross
he
generalization.
did. So what Tim Walz is doing, and I honestly, Tim, I think you got a tough job here because you've got to play whack-a-mole. You've got to pretend that Donald Trump didn't deliver rising take-home pay, which of course he did. You've got to pretend that Donald Trump didn't deliver lower inflation, which of course he did. And then you simultaneously got to defend Kamala Harris's atrocious economic record, which has made gas, groceries, and housing unaffordable for American citizens. I was raised by a woman who would sometimes go into medical debt so that she could put food on the table in our household. I know what it's like to not be able to afford the things that you need to afford. We can do so much better. To all of you watching, we can get back to an America that's affordable again. We just got to get back to common sense economic principles.
I hope we have a conversation on healthcare then.
Senator, Governor.
Please.
Thank you. Margaret?
We have a lot to get to.
JD is playing so
gentlemen,
smooth.
on many topics,
Yeah,
but
so
right now I want to
smooth
talk
right
about
now.
personal qualifications. The vice president is often
Walt is
the
starting to get a
last
little
voice
flustered.
the president hears before making consequential decisions. We want to ask you about your leadership qualities. Governor Walz,
Afghanistan.
you said you were in Hong Kong during the deadly Tiananmen Square protests in the spring of 1989. But Minnesota Public Radio and other media outlets are reporting that you actually didn't travel to Asia until August of that year.
They pushed
Can you
back?
explain that discrepancy?
Wow.
You have 2
Yeah,
minutes.
well, and to the folks out there who didn't get at the top of this, look,
I gotta look out the
I grew
window.
up in
Nope,
small
no
rural
meteor. What the hell?
Nebraska, town of 400, town that you rode your bike with your buddies till the street lights come on, and I'm proud of that service. I joined the National Guard at 17.
You're not
worked on
answering
Tunnelly
this.
Farm.
What does this have to do with your
answer.
lie
Here's what I
about
built.
Tiananmen
To become a
Square?
teacher, passionate about it. A young
I was
teacher.
I was raised in a middle
My
class
first year, I
household.
got the opportunity in the
middle
summer of
class
89,
kid.
to travel
Wow.
to China. 35 years ago, be able to do that.
Holy
I came back home and then started a program to take young people there.
This is
We would take
not an
basketball teams,
answer.
we would take baseball teams, we would take dancers, and we would go back and forth to China. The issue for that was to try and learn. Now, look, my community knows who I am. They saw where I was at.
Okay, I lied.
Look, I will be the first to tell
Right.
you, I have poured my
Just
heart
say I
into
got my
community.
dates wrong.
I've tried to do the best I can, but I've not been perfect. And I'm a knucklehead at times, but it's always been about that.
Jesus.
Those same people elected me to Congress for 12 years. And in Congress, I was one of the most bipartisan people, working on things like farm bills that we got done, working on veterans benefits. And then the people of Minnesota were able to elect me to governor twice.
I'm a knucklehead.
So look, my
I'm making a
commitment
shirt.
has been from the beginning
Yeah, I'm a
to make sure
knucklehead.
that
Wow.
I'm there for the people, to make sure that I get this right. I will say more than anything. Many times I will talk a lot. I will get caught up in the rhetoric. But being there the impact it made, the difference it made in my life, I learned
Holy
a lot about
shit.
China. I hear the critiques of this. I would make the case that Donald Trump should have come on one of those trips with us. I guarantee you he wouldn't be praising Xi Jinping about COVID. And I guarantee you he wouldn't
didn't
start a
praise
trade
Xi.
war that he ends
No.
up losing.
That never
So this
happened.
is about trying to understand the world. It's about trying to do the best you can for your community. And then it's putting yourself out there and letting your folks understand what it is. My commitment, whether it be through teaching, which I was good at, or whether it was being a good soldier or was being a good member of Congress, those are the things that I think are the values that people care about.
But he's
Governor,
obfuscating.
just
But
to
you
follow
lie.
up on that.
Yeah, it's
the
a
question
lie,
was, can you
but he
explain
handled
the
it. No, just-
discrepancy?
All I said on this was I got there that summer and misspoke on this. So I will just,
Misspoke. Okay.
that's what I've said.
Okay. All right.
So I was in
Liar.
Hong Kong and China during the democracy protests, went in. And from that, I learned a lot of what needed to be in governance.
And I've learned my lesson not to lie.
Thank you,
On
Governor.
that,
Senator Vance, in 2016, you called your running mate Donald Trump
Oh, here we go,
unfit
this
for
one.
the nation's
Yeah.
highest
You
office.
knew he was
and
gonna
you
get
said he
this.
could be America's Hitler. I know you've been asked many times, you said you regret those comments.
Yep.
And explained you then voted for Donald Trump in 2020. But
Yep.
the Washington Post reported new messages last week in which you also disparaged Trump's economic record while he was president, writing to someone in 2020, quote, Trump thoroughly failed to deliver his economic populism. You're now his running mate, and you've shifted many of your policy stances to align with his. If you become vice president, why should Americans trust that you will give Donald Trump the advice he needs to hear and not just the advice he wants to hear? You have 2 minutes.
Well, first of all, Margaret, because I've always been open. And sometimes, of course, I've disagreed with the president, but I've also been extremely open about the fact that I was wrong about Donald Trump. I was wrong, first of all, because I believed some of the media stories that turned out to be dishonest fabrications of his
Bingo.
record. But most
Yep.
importantly, Donald Trump delivered for the American people. Rising wages, rising take-home pay, an economy that worked for normal Americans, a secure southern border, a lot of things, frankly, that I didn't think he'd be able to deliver on. And yeah, when you screw up, when you misspeak, when you get something wrong and you change your mind, you ought to be honest with the American people about it. It's one of the reasons, Margaret, why I've done so many interviews is because I think it's important to actually explain to the American people where I come down on the issues and what changed. Now, you pointed out the messages from 2020. Margaret, I've been extremely consistent that I think there were a lot of things that we could have done better in the Trump administration the first round if Congress was doing its job. I strongly believe, and I've been a United States Senator, that Congress is not just a high-class debating society. It's not just a forum for senators and congressmen to whine about problems. It's a forum to govern. So there were a lot of things on the border, on tariffs, for example, where I think we could have done so much more if the Republican Congress and the Democrats in Congress had been a little bit better about how they govern the country. They were so obsessed with impeaching Donald Trump, they couldn't actually govern. And I want to talk about this tariff issue in particular, Margaret, because Tim just accused this of being a national sales tax. Look, the one thing, and you're probably surprised to hear me praising Joe Biden, but the one thing that Joe Biden did is he continued some of the Trump tariffs that protected American manufacturing jobs. And it's the one issue, the most pro-worker part of the Biden administration. It's the one issue where Kamala Harris has run away from Joe Biden's record. Think about this. If you're trying to employ slave laborers in China at $3 a day, you're going to do that and undercut the wages of American workers unless our country stands up for itself and says you're not accessing our markets unless you're paying middle-class Americans a fair wage.
Senator, your time is up. Nora?
Thank you.
Knucklehead.
Now to the issue of
I
reproductive
still can't believe he
rights.
said that.
Governor Walz, after Roe versus Wade was overturned, you signed a bill into law that made Minnesota one of the least restrictive states in the nation when it comes to abortion.
And that's
Former
an opening
President
for
Trump
Vance.
said in the last debate that you believe abortion, quote, in the 9th month is absolutely fine. Yes or no? Is that what you support? I'll give you 2 minutes.
That's not what the bill says, but look, this issue is what's on
And what does it
everyone's
say?
mind.
Yeah.
Donald Trump put this all into motion. He brags about how great it was
There are
that he put the
absolutely no
judges in
restrictions
and
in that
overturned
bill
Roe versus Wade.
Yes.
52
whatsoever.
years of personal autonomy. And then he tells us, oh, we send it to the states. It's a beautiful thing. Amanda Zaworski would disagree with you on it's a beautiful thing. A young bride in Texas waiting for their child at 18 weeks. She has a complication, a tear in the membrane. She needs to go in. The medical care at that point needs to be decided by the doctor. And that would have been an abortion. But in Texas, that would have put them in legal jeopardy. She went home, got sepsis, nearly dies, and now she may have difficulty having children. Or in Kentucky, Hadley Duvall, a 12-year-old child raped and impregnated by her stepfather. Those are horrific. Now, when God asked about that, Senator Vance said 2 wrongs don't make a right. There is no right in this. So in Minnesota, what we did was restore Roe versus Wade. We made sure that we put women in charge of their health care.
So far fucking
this
past
is not
that.
what, if you don't know Amanda or a Hadley, you soon will. Their Project 2025 is going to have
didn't
a
the gal who got
register-
sepsis? Didn't she get the
It's gonna
pill
make it more
and then
difficult, if
she
not
got
impossible,
sepsis because she
to
did
get
she
contraception
took the pill?
and limit access.
That
if
was the
not
one in
eliminate
Georgia.
access
Oh,
to
okay.
infertility treatments. For so many of you out there listening, me included, infertility treatments are why I have a child. That's nobody else's business, but those things are being proposed. And the catch-all on this is well, the states will decide what's right for Texas might not be right for Washington. That's not how this works. This is basic human right.
Yes,
We
it
have
is.
seen
It's very
maternal
much how it works.
mortality skyrocket in Texas, outpacing many other countries in the world. This is about healthcare. In Minnesota, we are ranked first in healthcare for a reason. We trust women, we trust doctors.
Senator, do you want to respond to the governor's claim? Will you create a federal pregnancy monitoring agency?
No, Nora, certainly we won't. And I want to talk about this issue because I know a lot of Americans care about it, and I know a lot of Americans don't agree with everything that I've ever said on this topic. And, you know, I grew up in a working class family in a neighborhood where I knew a lot of young women who had unplanned pregnancies and decided to terminate those pregnancies because they feel like they didn't have any other options. And, you know, one of them is actually very dear to me. And I know she's watching tonight, and I love you. And she told me something a couple years ago that she felt like if she hadn't had that abortion, that it would have destroyed her life because she was in an abusive relationship. And I think that what I take from that as a Republican who proudly wants to protect innocent life in this country, who proudly wants to protect the vulnerable, is that my party, we've got to do so much better of a job at earning the American people's trust back on this issue where they frankly just don't trust us. And I think that's one of the things that Donald Trump and I are endeavoring to do. I want us as a Republican Party to be pro-family in the fullest sense of the word. I want us to support fertility treatments. I want us to make it easier for moms to afford to have babies. I want it to make it easier for young families to afford a home so they can afford a place to raise that family. And I think there's so much that we can do on the public policy front just to give women more options. Now, of course, Donald Trump has been very clear that on the abortion policy specifically, that we have a big country and it's diverse. And California has a different viewpoint on this than Georgia. Georgia has a different viewpoint from Arizona. And the proper way to handle this, as messy as democracy sometimes is to let voters make these decisions, let the individual states make their abortion policy.
100%.
And I think that's what makes the most sense in a very big, a very diverse, and let's be honest, sometimes a very, very messy and divided country.
Governor, would you like to respond and also answer the question about restrictions?
Yeah, well, the question got asked and Donald Trump made the accusation that wasn't true about Minnesota. Well, let me tell you about this idea that there's diverse states. There's a young woman named Amber Thurman. She happened to be in Georgia, a restrictive state. Because of that, she had to travel a long distance to North Carolina to try and get her care. Amber Thurman died in that journey back and forth. The fact of the matter is, how can we as a nation say that your life and your rights, as basic as the right to control your own body, is determined on geography? There's a very real chance had Amber Thurman lived in Minnesota, she would be alive today. That's why the restoration of Roe versus Wade. When you listen to Vice President Harris talk about this subject and you hear me talk about it, you hear us talking exactly the same. Donald Trump is trying to figure out how to get the political right of this. I agree with a lot of what Senator Vance said about what's happening. His running mate, though, does not, and that's the problem.
Governor, your time is up. Senator, let me ask you about that. He mentioned, it was, I think, referring to a national ban. In the past, you have supported a federal ban on abortion after 15 weeks. In fact, you said if someone can't support legislation like that, quote, you are making the United States the most barbaric pro-abortion regime anywhere in the entire world. My question is, why have you changed your position?
Well, Nora, first of all, I never supported a national ban. I did when I was running for Senate in 2022 talk about setting some minimum national standard. For example, we have a partial birth abortion ban in place in this country at the federal level. I don't think anybody's trying to get rid of that, or at least I hope not, though I know that Democrats have taken a very radical pro-abortion stance. But Nora, one of the things that changed is in the state of Ohio, we had a referendum in 2023, and the people of Ohio voted overwhelmingly, by the way, against my position. And I think that what I learned from that, Nora, is that we've got to do a better job at winning back people's trust. So many young women would love to have families. So many young women also see an unplanned pregnancy as something that's going to destroy their livelihood, destroy their education, destroy their relationships. And we have got to earn people's trust back. And that's why Donald Trump and I are committed to pursuing pro-family policies, making childcare more accessible, making fertility treatments more accessible, because we've got to do a better job at that. And that's what real leadership is.
Governor, your response.
People are dying to adopt on the pro-abortion piece of that. No, we're not. We're pro-women. We're pro-freedom to make your own choice. We know what the implications are to not be that. Women having miscarriages, women not getting the care, physicians feeling like they may be prosecuted for providing that care. And as far as making sure that we're educating our children and giving them options, Minnesota's a state with one of the lowest teen pregnancy rates. We understand that too. We know that the options need to be available, and we make that true. We also make it, we're a top 3 state for the best place to raise children. But these two things, to try and say that we're pro-children, but we don't like this, or you guys are pro-abortion, that's not the case at all. We are pro-freedoms for women to make their choices, and we're going, and Kamala Harris is making the case, to make options for children more affordable, a $6,000 child tax credit, but we're not going to base that on the backs of making someone like Amber Thurman drive 600 miles to try and get health care.
Senator.
May I respond to that? First of all, Governor, I agree with you. Amber Thurman should still be alive, and there are a lot of people who should still be alive, and I certainly wish that she was.
Yeah,
and maybe
millions of babies.
You're free to disagree with me on this and explain this to me. But as I read the Minnesota law that you signed into law, the statute that you signed into law, it says that a doctor who presides over an abortion where the baby survives, the doctor is under no obligation to provide life-saving care to a baby who survives a botched late-term abortion. That is, I think, whether you're pro-choice or pro-abortion, that is fundamentally barbaric. And that's why I use that word, Nora, is because some of what we've seen. Do you want to force Catholic hospitals to perform abortions against their will? Because Kamala Harris has supported suing Catholic nuns to violate their freedom of conscience. We can be a big and diverse country where we respect people's freedom of conscience and make the country more pro-baby and pro-family. But please.
Yes, Governor, please respond.
Look, this is one where there's always something there. This is a very simple proposition. These are women's decisions to make about their healthcare decisions, and the physicians who know best when they need to do this. Trying to distort the way a law is written to try and make a point, that's not it at all.
What was I wrong about, Governor? Please tell me, what was I wrong about?
That is not the way the law is written. Look, I've given
Yes, it is. I've read it. Yes, it is.
On a lot of things that getting involved, that's been misread, and it was fact-checked at the last debate. But the point on this is there's a continuation of these guys to try and tell women or to get involved. I use this line on this, just mind your own business. On this, things worked best when Roe versus Wade was in place. When we do a restoration of Roe, that works best. That doesn't preclude us from increasing funding for children. It doesn't increase us from making sure that once that child's born, like in Minnesota, they get meals, they get early childhood education, they get health care. So the hiding behind we're going to do all these other things when you're not proposing them in your budget. Kamala Harris is proposing them. She's proposing all those things to make life easier for families.
I asked a specific question, Governor. You gave me a slogan as a response.
It's not the case. It's not true. That's not what the law says. So they fact-checked it with President Trump.
Gentlemen, there's a lot to discuss. We have to move on, and we're going to be right back
Missed your
with much more of
opportunity,
the
Vance.
CBS News vice presidential debate in
Tell him
just a moment.
9 months, shove it up your ass. Okay, so in the middle, folks, what do you think is going on? I think that Vance has been holding his own. Again, I go back to kinetics. Watch the physicality of these two debaters. Watch it with Vance and watch it with Timpon. And you can see that he's not comfortable. He did have a fairly decent response to that particular one question. Vance had openings that I wish he'd taken advantage of. You can't, I know, I understand. You can't be all answers to all people. But I wish that some of the opportunities that he'd taken, that is to say, Vance, would be okay, you don't have an abortion. Bring up the stat, for example, as I indicated earlier. There are lots of Americans who would love to be able to adopt a baby as their own. So maybe you do have the child, you let it out for adoption, and then, you don't have to worry about the spills and the barf and the cleanup, and it's so inconvenient for you. Hand off the baby. Give up the baby for adoption. And then it's not your responsibility anymore, because the bulk of the abortions are for inconvenience and medical necessity, being the major reason, is bullshit.
Yeah, absolutely. They use it as a form of birth control.
Wait a minute. Hey.
Oh, that's funny.
Is that your new T-shirt, mister?
It might be a variation of that, yes.
Sure might be. Imagine
Sorry, I
that.
could not resist.
Hey, listen, I understand why you blanked out for a second, because you were a busy little son. Typity type, graphic, typity type.
Could not help myself.
Overall, any thoughts, Earl and Sean, as to how Vance is doing up to this point, and how Timpon is doing up to this point?
Well, I think Timpon is doing about what I expected. He's lying. He's obfuscating. He's not answering any questions, which is pretty much what I expected from him. Vance is doing pretty well, but like BZ said, like you said, he missed a couple of golden opportunities to really stick it to him. And on a certain level, I don't really mind that, because I don't want him to like completely annihilate him and have people feel sorry for him.
You don't want him bullied.
Coming weeks.
Yeah.
But I think he's doing all. I'd give Vance a solid B+ at this point.
I agree with the B+ aspect of it. I think that he is fighting Waltz where he is. He's not punching up. He's not punching down. He's right where Waltz is.
Yeah.
And he's meeting him toe to toe. He did his lashing out at the moderators for fact checking him, I think was incredible. And I think it shows you what's there if it's needed. I think that if he needs to really get vicious, for lack of a better term, he can and will do it. But he hasn't really needed to, because they even fact-checked Waltz. Like, I'll give them credit there. They fact-checked Waltz.
I was surprised.
And they pushed back and said, you didn't even answer the question that we asked. I'll give credit where credit is due. They actually carried the torch there. But look, Waltz, and they're coming back now. Waltz isn't doing himself any favors. Here we go. No. Waltz looks very, very stressed.
Very stressed.
Debate. We want to turn now to America's gun violence epidemic. The leading cause of death for children and teens in America is by firearms. Senator Vance.
No, it's not.
Bullshit. No, it's
true.
Not. Would curb gun violence. You oppose red flag gun laws and legislation to ban certain semi-automatic rifles,
and
including
18 to 24 fentanyl's the biggest killer of.
Earlier this year, for the first time, the parents of a school shooter were convicted of involuntary manslaughter and sentenced to 10 years in prison. Do you think holding parents responsible could curb mass shootings?
Yeah.
I'll give you 2 minutes.
If they have culpability, yes,
absolutely.
Law enforcement and local
I don't think that's an issue.
No. I think in some cases the answer is going to be yes, and in some cases the answer is going to be no. And the details really matter here, of course. For example, if a kid steals a gun, that's going to be different than if a parent hands over a gun knowing that their kid is potentially dangerous. But look, I want to just sort of speak as a father of 3 beautiful little kids, and our oldest is now in 2nd grade. And like a lot of parents, we send our kids to school with such hope and such joy and such pride at their little faces on the first day of school. And we know, unfortunately, that a lot of kids are going to experience this terrible epidemic of gun violence. And of course, our hearts go out to the families that are affected by this terrible stuff. And we do have to do better. And I think that Governor Walz and I actually probably agree that we need to do better on this. The question is just, how do we actually do it? Now, here's something that really bothers me and worries me about this epidemic of violence. The gross majority, close to 90% in some of the statistics I've seen, of the gun violence in this country is committed with illegally obtained firearms. And while we're on that topic, we know that thanks to Kamala Harris's open border, we've seen a massive influx in the number of illegal guns run by the Mexican drug cartels. So that number, the amount of illegal guns in our country is higher today than it was 3.5 years ago. But what do we do about the schools? What do we do to protect our kids? And I think the answer is, and I say this not loving the answer, because I don't want my kids to go to school in a school that feels unsafe or where there are visible signs of security. But I unfortunately think that we have to increase security in our schools. We have to make the doors lock better. We have to make the doors stronger. We've got to make the windows stronger. And of course, we've got to increase school resource officers, because the idea that we can magically wave a wand and take guns out of the hands of bad guys, it just doesn't fit with recent experience.
It's a really
we've got
good
to make our
answer.
schools safer. And I think we've got to have some common sense.
It's a really solid
solutions for
answer.
how to do that.
Governor, you have 2 minutes.
And it's accurate.
Well, I
Yes.
think all the parents watching tonight, this is your biggest nightmare. Look, I got a 17-year-old, and he witnessed a shooting at a community center playing volleyball. Those things don't leave you. As a member of Congress, I sat in my
I don't
office
believe that.
surrounded by dozens of the Sandy Hook parents, and they were
Yeah.
looking at my 7-year-old picture on the wall. Their 7-year-old were dead, and they were asking us to do something. And look, I'm a hunter. I own firearms. The vice president is. We understand that the Second Amendment
Vice President's a
is there,
hunter?
but our first responsibility
Wait, where's
is to
the
our
breaking
kids
news
to figure
button?
this out.
Right.
In Minnesota, we've enacted enhanced red flag laws, enhanced background checks, and we can start to get data. But here's the problem. If we really want to solve this, we've got folks that won't allow research to be even done on gun violence.
Oh,
and this
bullshit.
idea that we should
What?
just live with it, and I
Who's
here's what I
stopping
do
you?
think, that this is a good start to the conversation.
Then where do we get
I
these numbers? You
100%
notice he
believe
didn't
that
push
Senator
back on the
Vance
90% comment.
hates
Where did
it when
JD
these
get
kids-
that number if
it's
you can't do
abhorrent, and it
research?
breaks
This
your
is
heart.
bullshit.
I agree with that.
It's
But
total
that's
bullshit.
not far enough when we know there are things that work. I've spent time in Finland and seen some Finnish schools. They don't have this happen, even though they have a high
It's
gun
a
ownership
different
rate in the
country.
country.
Yeah.
There are reasonable things that we can do to make a difference.
With a
It's not
significantly
infringing on
smaller
your Second Amendment.
population.
And the idea to have some of these weapons out there, it just doesn't make any sense. Kamala Harris, as an attorney general, worked on this issue. She knows that it's there. No one's trying to scaremonger and say we're taking your guns, but I ask all of you
You're not
out
trying
there,
to say that because you don't want
do you
people
want
to
your
know
schools
that.
hardened to look like a fort? Is that what we have to go when we know there's countries around the world that their children aren't practicing these types of drills? They're being kids. We owe it to them to get a fix. These are
And those
things that
kids
shouldn't
aren't
be that
overly
difficult.
medicated.
You
They're
can
not
still
eating
keep
all
your
the
firearms,
crap that
and we
they
can make a
feed us
difference.
Yeah.
We have
Yeah.
to.
in this
Yep.
country.
Listening tonight,
Not an
this
issue.
breaks your heart.
Senator.
Tim, first of all, I didn't know that your 17-year-old witnessed a shooting. I'm sorry about that, and I hope that he's
appreciate
doing
you
okay.
saying so.
Christ have mercy. It is awful. And I
It's weird.
appreciate
In
what
April,
Tim
Finland
said
had a
actually
school
about
shooting.
Finland, because I do think it illustrates some of the frankly weird differences between our own country's gun violence problem and Finland. Is okay. First of all, we have way higher rates of mental health abuse or mental health substance abuse. We have way higher rates of depression, way higher rates of anxiety. We
ADHD,
unfortunately have a
children
mental
on
health
Ritalin.
crisis in this country that I really do think that we need to get to the root
Autism.
causes of, because I don't think it's the whole reason why we have such a bad gun violence problem, but I do think it's a big piece of it. Another driver of the gun violence epidemic, especially
Lack
that
of
affecting our
parenting.
kids, it doesn't earn as
Society,
many
yes.
headlines, but is the terrible gun violence problem in a lot of our big cities. And this is why we have to empower law enforcement to arrest the bad guys, put them away, and take gun offenders off the streets. I think there's a whole host of things that we can do here, but I do think at our schools, we've got to talk about more security.
Senator, thank you. Governor, you previously opposed an assault weapons ban, but only later in your political career did you change your position. Why?
Yeah, I sat in that office with those Sandy Hook parents. I've become friends with school shooters. I've seen it. Look, the NRA, I
With
was
school
an NRA
shooters?
guy for a long time. They used to teach gun safety. I'm of an age where My shotgun was in my car so I could pheasant hunt after football practice. That's
So what
not where we live
changed?
today.
Society
And
or the
several things I
tool?
wanna mention on
Society
this
has
is
changed.
talking about cities and
Not
where
the
it's at.
tool.
The number one where the most firearm deaths happen in Minnesota are rural suicides. And we have an epidemic of
Okay, but that's not
children
gun
getting
violence.
guns and
No.
shooting themselves.
That's
And
not
so
gun violence.
we
Suicide
have,
is
and
not
we
gun
should
violence.
look at
It's
all of the
mental health,
issues.
which JD already said is a
Making sure
problem.
folks have health care and all that, but I want to be very careful. This idea of stigmatizing mental health, just because you have a mental health issue doesn't mean you're violent. And I think what we end up doing is
Nobody-
we start
He
looking
didn't
for
say
people.
that.
Sometimes it just is the guns. It's just the guns, and there are things that you can do about it. But I do think that this
The
is
look
one,
on
and
JD
I think this is a
Vance's
healthy
face.
conversation.
Yeah.
I think there's a capacity to find solutions on this that work, protect Second Amendment, protect
Have
our
either of
children.
you ever
That's what
caught
we
your
need.
guns doing
Gentlemen,
something
thank
they
you,
shouldn't be
Margaret.
doing?
Thank you, Nora.
Yeah, actually, I caught
Let's
mine
turn now
humping
to the
not too
top
long ago.
contributor to inflation.
I
high
put them
cost
both
of
in different
housing
rooms.
and
I
rent.
rubbed their nose in it. It was
There's a
terrible.
shortage of more than 4
I
million
use
homes in the
newspaper.
United States, and that contributes to the high housing prices. Governor Walz, the Harris campaign promises a $25,000 down payment assistance for first-time home buyers and a $10,000 tax credit. They also promise to build 3 million new homes. Where are you building these homes, and won't handing out that kind of money just drive up prices higher?
No, it's not handing out. We have, first, let me say this issue of housing, and I think those of you listening on this, the problem we've had is that we've got a lot of folks that see housing as another commodity. It can be bought up, it can be shifted, it can be moved around. Those are not folks living in those houses. Those of you listening tonight,
I'm going to shift my
that
house
is a
out of
big deal. I
California
bought and
soon.
owned
What is
one
he
house in my
talking
life.
about?
My mom still lives in the house where I was. And when I think of a house,
He
I'm
grew up a
thinking
middle
of
class
Christmas
kid. Leave him
services
alone.
after
Of
midnight
course.
mass where you go with your family. We need to make it more affordable. And
It's
one
the
of the
place you
things,
go
as I
at night
said,
to be with your
this
family.
program that the vice
Okay.
president is pushing forward and bringing a new way of approaching this is something we're doing in Minnesota from that lead. We in the state invested in making sure our housing was the biggest investment that we'd ever made in housing. It starts to make it easier. We cut some of the
How?
red tape. Local folks, look, we can't do
That's
it
not
federal
giving
level.
money
The
away.
local folks
No.
make it easier to build those homes. And then that down payment
Yes.
assistance. I can tell all of you out there,
I'll tell you right
One
now,
of the-
every conservative's going, yes,
certainly for
if you
me,
remove the restrictions,
using
that
the
would be
GI Bill
easier.
was
This
one
has
thing,
nothing to do with the
but a
question.
veteran's home loan, the big thing about a veteran's home loan is you don't have to pay the down payment. Those are things that make it there. Now, look, you're going to
They
pay it
earn
back,
that by
and you're
being
gonna pay your mortgage.
veterans.
Those are things that we know in the long run, the appreciated value, the generational wealth that's created from it. And I will give Minneapolis an example. Minneapolis is the one city where we've seen the lowest
But they
inflation
want to
rates.
tax the
We've
shit
seen
out
a
of
12%
generational wealth. They
increase in
want
stock
generational
because we
wealth to
put some
be
of these things
a
in.
pain.
And we're implementing a state program to make sure we give some of that
They
down
don't
payment
want people
assistance.
generating
We get it
generational
back from
health,
people because
generational
here's
wealth.
what we know.
Or
People
health.
with stable housing
Both are
end
true.
up with stable
Oh, yeah.
jobs. People with stable housing have their kids able to get to school. All of those things in the long run end up saving our money. And that's the thing that I think we should be able to find some common ground in.
People
we
who have
can't
stable
blame,
housing have an easier job getting their
immigrants
kids
for the
to
only
school.
reason. That's
Is
not
he
the
talking
case
about
that's
mobile
happening in many
homes?
cities. The
Yeah.
fact of the matter is that we don't have enough
I
naturally
don't think he knows what he's talking about.
affordable housing, but we can make sure that the government's there to help kickstart it, create that base.
Governor, your time is up. Senator Vance, as far as your campaign's position, the promise is to seize federal lands to build homes.
Hold on, I want to
remove
respond to what this
regulation,
bullshit.
provide tax breaks, and cut back on immigration, which you say pushes up prices. Where are you going to build all the new homes you're promising, and what part of any of this plan will provide immediate relief? You have 2 minutes.
Well, first of all, Tim just said something that I agree with. We don't want to blame immigrants for higher housing prices, but we do want to blame Kamala Harris for letting in millions of illegal aliens into this
Pass
country,
the bill.
which
Thank
does drive up costs, Tim.
Pass the bill.
25 million illegal aliens competing with Americans for scarce homes is one of the most significant drivers of home prices in the country. It's why we have massive increases in home prices that have happened right alongside massive increases in illegal alien populations under Kamala Harris's leadership. Now, Tim just mentioned a bunch of ideas. Now, some of those ideas I actually think are halfway decent, and some of them I disagree with. But the most important thing here is Kamala Harris is not running as a newcomer to politics. She is the sitting vice president. If she wants to enact all of these policies to make housing more affordable, I invite her to use the office that the American people already gave her, not sit around and campaign and do nothing while Americans find the American dream of homeownership completely unaffordable. Now, you asked, Margaret, what would immediately change the equation for American citizens if you lower energy prices? As Donald Trump says, drill, baby, drill. One of the biggest drivers of housing costs, aside from illegal immigration, is, think about it. If a truck driver is paying 40% more for diesel, then the lumber he's delivering to the job site to build the house is also going to become a lot more expensive. If we open up American energy, you will get immediate pricing relief for American citizens, not, by the way, just in housing, but in a whole host of other economic goods too.
Senator Vance, you still have 23 seconds there. Do you want to answer?
Can I have it?
Where, Governor, we will get to you in a moment. But Senator, where are you going to seize the federal lands? Can you clarify?
Well, what Donald Trump has said is we have a lot of federal lands that aren't being used for anything. They're not being used for national park. They're not being used, and they could be places where we build a lot of housing. And I do think that we should be opening up building in this country. We have a lot of land that could be used. We have a lot of Americans that need homes. We should be kicking out illegal immigrants.
Why does the federal government get to own everything?
More homes for the Americans who deserve to be here.
Yeah,
disagree.
Your time is up.
Disagree.
Governor, I do want to let you respond to the
I should be able to go in and buy
President
federal land and build on
letting
it.
in
Well, of course, that's not
migrants,
true. And again,
and that
you
it's
have the
affecting
facts. I
housing
guess we
prices.
agreed not to fact check. I'll check it. That look, crossings are down compared to when Donald Trump left office. But
Nope.
it's again blaming
Jesus.
and not trying to find the solution. I
Nope.
was going to
Nope.
ask though on this
Nope.
question: are we going to drill and build houses in the same federal land? And I think when people hear federal lands, these are really important pieces of land. Now, Minnesota doesn't have a lot of federal lands. I know in the western part of the countries we do. There's not a lot of federal lands in and around Minneapolis, for example. So the issue is I don't understand the federal lands issue unless we see
Oh, it's very
this. And I
simple.
worry about this as
The
someone
people in
who
the
cares deeply
suburbs
about our
who
national parks
would sell their
and our
houses
federal
and
lands.
move
Look,
out to the middle of
Minnesota,
nowhere in
we
a
protect
heartbeat,
these things.
as
We've
most
got
people
about
would do
20%
right
of the
now.
world's fresh water. These lands protect. They're there for a
If you
reason.
can
They
afford
belong to
homes,
all of us. But
inflation.
again, this is when you view housing
They belong to
and you
all
view
of
these
us.
things as
Really? Then can I just go build
that
a
there's
house on
chance to
federal
make money
land?
here.
Don't
Let's take
think
this federal
so.
land and let's sell it to people for that. I think there's better ways to do this. We've seen it in Minnesota. We're able to refurbish some of these houses. We're able to make some investments. That gets people in. And I'm still on the fact on this. Economists, Senator Vance, you said you don't like the economists. Which economists are saying that it is immigrants that's adding to the cost?
Governor,
Where's
your
the study?
time is up. But Senator, on that point, I'd like for you to clarify. There are many contributing factors to high housing costs. What evidence do you have that migrants are part of this problem?
Well, there's a Federal Reserve study that we're happy to share after the debate. We'll put it up on social media, actually, that really drills down on the connection between increased levels of migration, especially illegal immigration, and higher housing prices. Now, of course, Margaret, that's not the entire driver of higher housing prices. It's also the regulatory regime of Kamala Harris. Look, we are a country of builders. We're a country of doers. We're a country of explorers. But we increasingly have a federal administration that makes it harder to develop our resources, makes it harder to build things, and wants to throw people in jail for not doing everything exactly as Kamala Harris says they have to do. And what that means is that you have a lot of people who would love to build homes who aren't able to build homes. I actually agree with Tim Walz. We should get out of this idea of housing as a commodity. But the thing that has most turned housing into a commodity is giving it away to millions upon millions of people who have no legal right to be here.
What are the federal regulations? I deal with this as a governor.
You can very quickly reply.
I'm sorry. I get this as a governor, and I don't necessarily disagree with that, that in some cases, many of those are local, many of them are state. I don't know which ones are federal, but I think whenever we talk regulations, people think they can get rid of them. I think you want to be able to get out of your house in a fire. I think you want to make sure that it's fireproof and those types of things. So which are the regulations? Because the vice president's not responsible for those. Congress writes those.
Governor, thank you. Gentlemen.
Wasn't the vice president part of
have a lot
Congress
to
for a
get
long
to.
time?
You're passionate about the housing crisis. I can tell. But Nora?
Thank you. One of the top problems facing Americans is the high cost of health care. Senator Vance, at the last presidential debate, former President Trump was asked about replacing the Affordable Care Act. In response, he said, I have concepts of a plan. Since then, Senator, you've talked about changing how chronically ill Americans get health insurance. Can you explain how that would work? And can you guarantee that Americans with pre-existing conditions won't pay more? I'll give you 2 minutes.
Well, of course, we're going to cover Americans with pre-existing conditions. In fact, a lot of my family members have gotten health care. I believe, members of my family actually got private health insurance, at least for the first time, switched off of Medicaid onto private insurance for the first time under Donald Trump's leadership. And I think that, a lot of people have criticized this concepts of a plan remark. I think it's very simple common sense. I think as Tim Walz knows from 12 years in Congress, you're not going to propose a 900-page bill standing on a debate stage. It would bore everybody to tears, and it wouldn't actually mean anything because part of this is the give and take of bipartisan negotiation. Now, when Donald Trump was actually president, and again, he has a record to be proud of, prescription drugs fell in 2018 for the first time in a very long time. Under Kamala Harris's leadership, prescription drugs are up about 7%. Under Donald Trump's entire 4 years, they were up about 1.5%.
Well, one of the first things Biden did when he got in office was reverse that executive order, and then 6 months later, sign the exact same executive order and claim he lowered prices.
That price transparency will actually give American consumers a little bit more choice, and will also drive down costs.
And people fell
we
for
talked about, the reinsurance regulations is what I was talking about. Look, Donald Trump has said that if we allow states to experiment a little bit on how to cover both the chronically ill but the non-chronically ill, it's not just a plan. He actually implemented some of these regulations when he was president of the United States. And I think you can make a really good argument that it salvaged Obamacare, which was doing disastrously until Donald Trump came along. And I think it's an important point about President Trump. Of course, you don't have to agree with everything that President Trump has ever said or ever done. But when Obamacare was crushing under the weight of its own regulatory burden and healthcare costs, Donald Trump could have destroyed the program. Instead, he worked in a bipartisan way to ensure that Americans had access to affordable care. It's not perfect, of course, and there's so much more that we can do. But I think that Donald Trump has earned the right to put in place some better healthcare policies. He's earned it because he did it successfully the first time.
Governor?
All right, here's where being an old guy gives you some history. I was there at the creation of the ACA. And the reason it was so important is I come from a major healthcare state, home of the Mayo Clinic, home to Medical Alley, 3M, Medtronic, all of those. We understand healthcare. It's why we're ranked first on affordability and accessibility and quality of healthcare. And so what I know is under Kamala Harris, more people are covered than they have before. And those of you listening, this is critical to you. Now, Donald Trump all of a sudden wants to go back and remember this. He ran on the first thing he was going to do on day one was to repeal Obamacare. On day one, he tried to sign an executive order to repeal the ACA. He signed on to a
because it's a garbage bill
to repeal the ACA, but lost at the Supreme Court.
Because people got kicked out of the plans they wanted.
Had it not been for the courage
I could
of
not
John
keep the
McCain
doctor
that
that I wanted.
Now,
despite that promise, the costs have gone through the roof.
If you're sitting
on it,
you got asthma, too bad. If you're a woman, probably not. Broke your foot during football.
Nobody is ever going to be denied for a pre-existing condition again. It just will not happen.
With Medicare, we have 10 drugs that will come online, the most common ones.
And all these illegals that don't have any health care are getting it somehow.
Donald Trump said, I've got a concept of a plan. It cracked me up as a fourth grade teacher because my kids would have never given me that. But what Senator Vance just explained might be worse than a concept, because what he explained is pre-Obamacare. And I'll make this as simple as possible because I have done this for a long time. What they're saying is, if you're healthy, why should you be paying more? So what they're going to do is let insurance companies pick who they insure, because guess what happens? You pay your premium, it's not much. They figure they're not going to have to pay out to you. But those of you a little older, gray, got cancer, you're going to get kicked out of it. That's why the system didn't work. Kamala Harris will protect and enhance the ACA.
Governor, thank you. Senator, you have not yet explained
fear-mongering of the highest order
people with pre-existing conditions or laid out that plan.
Well, look, we currently have laws and regulations in place right now that protect people with pre-existing conditions. We want to keep those regulations in place, but we also want to make the health insurance marketplace function a little bit better. Now, what Governor Walz just said
sell across
is
state
actually
lines,
not
game
true.
over.
A lot of what happened and the reason that Obamacare was crushing
as soon as you sell across state lines,
a lot of young and healthy
and most
people
Americans don't realize how much touch
actually
hospitals,
helped address
healthcare,
that
and
problem,
medical
and he did so in
by
a way that
Congress
preserved
to
people's
keep it the
access
way
to
it
coverage
is.
who had pre-existing conditions. But again, something that these guys do is they make a lot of claims.
Now, the
about if
hospitals
Donald Trump
are the
becomes
worst
president,
price
all of
gougers
these
in this
terrible
country, and
consequences are
nobody
gonna
does
ensue.
anything about
But
it.
in reality, Donald Trump was president. Inflation was low. Take-home pay was higher, and he saved the very program from a Democratic administration that was collapsing and would have collapsed absent his leadership. He did his job, which is govern in a bipartisan way and get results, not just complain about problems, but actually solve them.
Governor, did enrollment under the Affordable Care Act go up under the Trump administration?
It's higher now that we've seen it go up. Look, people are using it. The
No,
system
that wasn't the
works.
question.
And
No.
about this of young people or whatever, that's the individual
So I'm
mandate
hearing from
piece of
other
this.
folks that are
And the
watching this.
Republicans
That somebody
fought
said Tim
tooth and
Waltz
nail,
looks like he's
saying,
coming
well,
across
Americans
as
should be free to
manic
do
and
this. Well, then what
terrified.
I think
happens
the
He
individual
is.
mandate is a good
That's
idea.
exactly. Look at his
I think
face.
the idea of making
That's
sure the risk
everything.
pool is broad enough to cover everyone, that's the only way insurance works. When it doesn't, it collapses. You are asking pre-ACA.
It's not the only way
where we
insurance
get people
works.
out. Look,
That's the problem. They want
people
you to think that's
know
the only way
that they
insurance will
need to
work.
be on health care. People expect it to be there. And when we are able to make it, and we are making it this way, when we incentivize people to be in the market, when we help people who might not be able to afford it get there, and we make sure
People that
then
can't afford
when
it
you get
had
sick and old,
Medicare and
it's there for you.
Medicaid. They
Because I
had
heard
the
people
state
say, well,
plans.
I don't want to buy into Medicare
If
or
you
whatever. Good luck
wanted it
buying
for the
healthcare
love
once you
of
get past
God,
70.
I
So look,
worked in the
ACA
projects for
works.
how
We can
many years,
continue
and
to do better.
everybody
Kamala
in that
Harris did that.
system
The way
who
she made
lived there
everything better
had
was
healthcare coverage.
negotiating those 10 drugs on Medicare
Taxpayer
for the first
paid,
time in
but it
American
was
history.
it was
Thank you,
healthcare
Margaret.
coverage.
Can I address that?
I
Earl, am I
apologize.
wrong?
We're out of
Go
time.
ahead,
We have a
Laura.
number of subjects to
Nope,
discuss.
you're not wrong at
Margaret,
all.
Let's talk about families in America. There is a child care crisis
Sure.
in this country, and the United States is one of the very few developed countries in the world
Well, shoot,
without a
abortions are
national
solving
paid
that,
leave
aren't
program
they?
for new parents. Governor Walz, you said that if Democrats win both the White House and Congress, this is a day one priority for you. How long should employers be required to pay workers while they are home taking care of their newborns? You have 2 minutes.
Yeah, well,
A
that's
year.
negotiable, and that's what Congress worked. But here's what the deal is. Americans sitting out there right now, you may work for a big company. Look, we're home in Minnesota to some of the largest Fortune 500 companies. Kamala Harris knows that in California. Those companies provide paid family medical leave. One is, I think they're moral and they think it's a good thing, but it also keeps their employees healthy. We in Minnesota passed a paid family medical leave. You have a child, and I had to go back to work 5 days after my kids were born. This allows you to stay home a certain amount of time. What we know is that gets the child off to a better start. The family works better. They stay in their employers. We
Well,
get more
his stitches
consistency in
hadn't
that.
healed yet
So
from
Kamala
the
Harris has made it a
Right.
priority.
delivery.
We implemented it in Minnesota, and we see growth. That's how you become a pro-business state. But the negotiations on it, and here's the issue: those big companies are able to offer it.
Hey,
Those of you out there who don't,
I gotta
have
say,
it,
I agree with
just
Tim Waltz
imagine
here. The
what
state
happens
should
if
be
you get
handling it.
cancer or your child gets sick.
He's
We
right.
know
This
what
is a
happens.
state issue. The
You end
state
up
should be
staying
doing it.
home. In some places, that means no paycheck because you've got no protection on that. This is the case of an
People could
economy that
vote
Donald
for a
Trump
different
has set
result.
for the wealthiest amongst us.
And I'm not
He's
against
willing to give
paid
those
family leave. I'm not.
tax breaks to the wealthiest. He's willing to say, bust those unions up, do whatever. What we're saying is the economy works best.
Unions are doing
when
great
it
right
works
now for the
all of us.
longshoremen.
And so a paid
Sure,
family medical leave program, and I will tell you, go
increase, no
to the
problem.
families or
They
go to
already
the
make
businesses
on
and
average
ask them. As far as
$140,000 a year.
childcare on this,
Yes, it's a
you have
very
to
I
look
couldn't
at
exclusive
believe
series
it
of
when I
on
heard
the
this.
land side. You can't
And that
expect
doesn't
the most
include
important
benefits.
people in our lives to take care of our children or our parents to get paid the least amount of money. And we have to
By the way,
make
I'm
it
applying
easier
for the
folks to
longshore
be able to
union
get
here
into that
Damn
business
well
tomorrow.
straight
and then to
better,
make sure that
mister.
folks are able to pay for that. We were able to do it in Minnesota, and I'm still telling you this. We were listed as the best state. We're still in crisis on this. A federal program of paid family and medical leave and help with this will enhance our workforce, enhance our families, and make it easier to have the children that you want.
Governor,
How
your
is it
time
any
is
different
up.
than short-term
Senator,
disability,
do you
which is
support
handled
a
by the state?
national paid leave program? And if so, for
That's
how
it.
long should employers be mandated to pay their employees while they are home taking care of their newborn? You have 2 minutes.
Yeah, well, first
that
of all,
you
Margaret, a
can't
number of my Republican
federalize
colleagues and some
everything.
Democrats
No.
too have worked on this issue, and I think there is a bipartisan solution.
Can you
here because a
imagine?
lot
I'll
of us
tell you right
care about
now,
this
being on
issue.
short-term
I mean,
disability
look,
in California,
I speak
if
from this
I need
very
help,
personally
it
because
takes
I'm
a
married to a
month
beautiful woman
before I get an
who's
answer.
an incredible mother to our three
Imagine on a
beautiful
federal
kids, but is
level.
also a very,
Holy
very
shit.
brilliant corporate litigator. And I'm so
Oh yeah,
proud of her.
multiply
But being a working
the
mom,
number of
even
people
for somebody
in
with
just
all of the advantages
California
of my wife, is
across the entire
extraordinarily
U.S.
difficult. And it's
And
not
how
just
much
difficult
is
for
that
the
All you
going
got
to
to do is
cost?
she
look
actually
at
had
look at
access
what
to
the
paid
VA
family
does.
leave because she worked for
Yeah.
a
I
bigger
know some
company.
people who
But
have
the
to deal with the
cultural
VA on a regular
pressure
basis,
on
and
young families and especially
just
young women,
extrapolate that on a
I think
national
makes it
level.
really hard for
Yep.
people to choose the family model they want. A lot of young
Mr.
women would
Lonnie
like to go back
Poindexter,
to
sir,
work
thank you for
immediately.
joining us
Some would
this
like to spend
evening.
a little time home with the kids. Some would like to
Thank
spend
you very
longer at
much,
home with the
brother.
kids. We should have a family care model that makes
Now, I
choice
was
possible.
told
And I
by a
think this is a
certain
very
somebody
important
that
substantive difference between Donald Trump and
I
Kamala
should be
Harris's
give him
approach.
signing in at
I mean, look,
8
if you look
p.m.
at the federal
Pacific.
programs that we have that support paid family leave right now, the
Who
Community
told you
Development
that?
Block Grant, and there's another
Give
block
you
grant
one
program
guess.
that spends a lot of money from the federal government.
Pay
These
attention to it.
programs only go to one kind of childcare model. Let's say you'd like your
Well,
church
welcome.
maybe to help you out with childcare.
It's glad
Maybe
to
you
be
live in a
here.
rural
Can you
area
guys
or
see
an
me
urban
okay?
area and you'd like to get together with
Yes.
families in your neighborhood to provide childcare in the way that makes the most sense. You don't get access to any of these federal monies. We want to promote choice in how we deliver family care and how we promote childcare because look, it is unacceptable. And, of course, Tim and I have been on the campaign trail a lot the past 7 or 8 weeks. And one of the biggest complaints I hear from young families is people who feel like they don't have options, like they're choosing between going to work or taking care for their kids. That is an incredible burden to put on American families. We're the only country that does it. I think we could do a heck of a lot better.
Senator, thank
Just not
you.
federally.
You have also said, Senator Vance, many things about the American family. The Federal Reserve says parents will spend nearly as much on childcare as they do on housing each month. So I want to get your thoughts on this.
So we're broadcasting now?
President Trump
Yes.
Yes, sir. We
recently
are live
said,
on the air.
Yes.
as
Oh,
much
okay.
as
Well, I
childcare
can't
is
pick my
talked about
nose.
as being expensive, it's
I mean, you
relatively
can,
speaking,
Yeah.
not
but it'll be
very
forever
expensive
enshrined at
compared to the kinds of numbers
shrmedia.com.
we'll be taking
Yeah.
in. Is President Trump committed to the $5,000 per child tax credit that you have described? You have 1 minute.
Well, what President Trump said, Margaret, I just want to defend my running mate here a little bit, is that we're going to be taking in a lot of money by penalizing companies for shipping jobs overseas and penalizing countries who employ
Yes.
slave laborers and then ship their products back into our country and undercut the wages of American workers. It's the heart of the Donald Trump economic plan. Cut taxes for American workers and American families. Cut taxes for businesses that are hiring and building companies in the United States of America, but penalize companies and countries that are shipping jobs overseas. That's the heart of the economic proposal. And I think what President Trump is saying is that when we bring in this additional revenue with higher economic growth, we're going to be able to provide paid family leave, childcare options that are viable and workable for a lot of American families.
Can you clarify how that will solve the child care shortage?
Well, because as Tim said, a lot of the child care shortage is we just don't have enough resources going into the multiple people who could be providing family care options. And we're going to have to, unfortunately, look, we're going to have to spend more money. We're going to have to induce more people to want to provide child care options for American families. Because the reason it's so expensive right now is because you've got way too few people providing this very essential service.
Thank you, Senator.
There's a
Governor
reason he's
Walz,
doing this.
Your
We'll discuss
ticket
later.
also has some child care tax credit proposals. Do you think Congress will agree to the $6,000 credit for newborns and $3,000 credit for children over the age of 6, as your campaign has promised? Is that realistic?
Well, if these members of Congress are listening to anybody, I can tell you, and this is the biggest issue. Everybody listening tonight knows. I mean, I'm sure they were shocked to hear it's not that expensive. And let's be clear, whether it's 5,000 or 6,000, that pays you about 3 or 4 months. Let's be clear of where we're at on this. It's because we got out of an imbalance on this. We thought we were going to get by not paying people. I don't think Senator
This
Vance
is the biggest issue? He
I'm
really
not
just
opposed to
said
what he's
that?
talking about on options. We've done scholarship types of things. I think we need to be open to making the case. But the issue here is, the question you asked is, you're not going to pay for it with these tariffs. That's just adding another $4,000 on the family and taking less. So not only do they not get the money to pay for that, they're $4,000.
Tariff lie has been debunked a bazillion times too.
And so I think the issue here is, if those members of Congress, I can't believe they're not. When I go to businesses, sure, they'll talk about taxes sometime. but they will lead with childcare and they will lead with housing, because we know the problem is, especially in a state like Minnesota, we need more workers because our economy is growing, but we need the workforce.
Governor, thank you. We need to move on. Nora?
Let's talk about the state of democracy, the top issue for Americans after the economy and inflation. After the 2020 election, President Trump's campaign and others filed 62 lawsuits contesting the results. Judges, including those appointed by President Trump and other Republican presidents, looked at the evidence and said there was no widespread fraud. The governors of
So she
every
just admitted
state
that
in the
there's
nation,
no
Republicans and Democrats,
no bias amongst
certified
judges.
the 2020 election results
That's good to
and
know.
sent a legal slate of electors to Congress for January 6th. Senator Vance, you have said you would not have certified the last presidential election and would have asked the states to submit alternative electors. That has been called unconstitutional and illegal. Would you again
By
seek
who,
to
though?
challenge this year's election results,
It's
even
been done
if
before.
every governor
I know.
certifies the results? I'll give you 2 minutes.
Well, Nora, first of all, I think that we're focused on the future. We need to figure out how to solve the inflation crisis caused by Kamala Harris's policies, make
4
housing
fucking years
affordable,
ago.
make groceries affordable, and that's what we're focused on. But I want to answer your question because you did ask it. Look, what President Trump has said is that there were problems in 2020, and my own belief is that we should fight about those issues, debate those issues peacefully in the public square, and that's all I've said, and that's all that Donald Trump has said. Remember, he said that on January the 6th, the protesters ought to protest peacefully. And on
Yes.
January the 20th, what happened? Joe Biden became the president. Donald Trump left the White House. And now, of course, unfortunately, we have all of the negative policies that have come from the Harris-Biden administration. I believe that we actually do have a threat to democracy in this country, but unfortunately, it's not the threat to democracy that Kamala Harris and Tim Walz want to talk about. It is the threat of censorship. It's Americans casting aside lifelong friendships because of disagreements over politics. It's big technology companies silencing their fellow citizens. And it's Kamala Harris saying that rather than debate and persuade her fellow Americans, she'd like to censor people who engage in misinformation. I think that is a much bigger threat
Sorry,
to
I'm
democracy
reading
than anything
tweets.
that we've seen in this country
I'm
in the
listening,
last
but
4 years,
man.
in the last 40 years. Now, I'm really proud, especially given that I was raised by 2 lifelong blue-collar Democrats, to have the endorsement of Bobby
Ben Shapiro
Kennedy
said
Jr.
Vance
and
is
Tulsi
giving a
Gabbard,
tremendous answer on
lifelong
illegal
leaders in the
immigration.
Democratic
Waltz looks
coalition.
like
Of
he's
course,
being
they
detained
don't
for
agree with me and Donald
shoplifting.
Trump on every issue. We don't have to agree on every issue, but we're united behind a basic American First Amendment principle that we ought to debate our differences. We ought to argue about them. We ought to try to persuade our fellow Americans. Kamala Harris is engaged in censorship at an industrial scale. She did it during COVID. She's done it over a number of other issues, and that to me is a much bigger threat to democracy than what Donald Trump said when he said that protesters should peacefully protest on January the 6th.
Good job. Good answer.
Well, I've enjoyed tonight's debate, and I think there was a lot of commonality here. And I'm sympathetic to misspeaking on things, and I think I might have with the senator. But
Me too, man.
There's one though that this one is troubling to me, and I say that because I think we need to tell the story. Donald Trump refused to acknowledge this, and the fact is that I don't think we can be the frog in the pot and let the boiling water go up. He was very clear. I mean, he lost this election, and he said he didn't. 140 police officers were beaten at the Capitol that day. Some with the American flag, several later died. And it wasn't just in there. In Minnesota, a group gathered on the state capitol grounds in St. Paul and said, we're marching to the governor's residence and there may be casualties. The only person there was my son and his dog, who was rushed out crying by state police. That issue and Mike Pence standing there as they were chanting, hang Mike Pence. Mike Pence made the right decision. So, Senator, it was adjudicated over and over and over. I worked with kids long enough to know, and I said as a football coach, sometimes you really want to win, but the democracy is bigger than winning an election. You shake hands, and then you try and do everything you can to help the other side win. That's what was at stake here. Now, the thing I'm most concerned about is the idea that imprisoning your political opponents, already laying the groundwork for people not accepting this. And a president's words matter. A president's words matter. People hear that. So I think this issue of settling
JD's
our
going to light him
differences
up
in the
on that
ballot
statement.
box, shaking hands when we lose, being honest about it.
Hillary
to
didn't.
deny what happened on January 6th, the first time in American history that a president or anyone tried to overturn a fair election and the peaceful transfer of power. And here we are 4 years later in the same boat. I will tell you this, that when this is over, we need to shake hands this election, and the winner needs to be the winner. This has got to stop. It's tearing our country apart.
Margaret?
Senator Vance, did you want to respond to that?
Yeah, well, look, Tim, first of all, it's really rich for Democratic leaders to say that Donald Trump is a unique threat to democracy when he peacefully gave over power on January the 20th, as we have done for 250 years in this country. We are going to shake hands after this debate and after this election. And of course, I hope that we win, and I think we're going to win. But if Tim Walz is the next vice president, he'll have my prayers, he'll have my best wishes, and he'll have my help whenever he wants it. But we have to remember that for years in this country, Democrats protested the results of elections. Hillary Clinton,
the only person
in
who died on January 6th was
said
actually
that Donald
Babbitt.
Trump had the election stolen by Vladimir Putin because the Russians bought like $500,000 worth of Facebook ads. This has been going on for a long time. And if we want to say that we need to respect the results of the election, I'm on board. But if we want to say, as Tim Walz is saying, that this is just a problem that Republicans have had, I don't buy that.
Governor.
January 6th was not Facebook ads. And I think a revisionist history on this. Look, I
Wait, so January
don't
6th was done by the
understand how
Russians?
we got to this point. But the issue was that happened. Donald Trump can do it. And all of us say there's no place for this. It has massive repercussions. This idea that there's censorship to stop people from threatening to kill someone, threatening to do something, that's not censorship. Censorship is book banning. We've seen that. We've seen that brought up. I just think for everyone tonight, and I'm going to thank Senator Vance, I think this is the conversation they want to hear. And I think there's a lot of agreement. But this is one that we are miles apart on. This was a threat to our democracy in a way that we had not seen. And it manifested itself because of Donald Trump's inability to say. He is still saying he didn't lose the election. I would just ask that. Did he lose the 2020 election?
Tim, I'm focused on the future. Did Kamala Harris censor Americans from speaking their mind in the wake of the 2020 COVID situation?
That is a damning non-answer.
It's a damning non-answer for you to not talk about censorship. Obviously, Donald Trump and I think that there were problems in 2020. We've talked about it. I'm happy to talk about it further. But you guys attack us for not believing in democracy, the most sacred right under the United States.
I love how they keep trying to act like Trump is the incumbent. The Democrats just keep doing that.
Yeah.
Kamala Harris wants to use the power of the government and big tech to silence people from speaking their minds. That is a threat to democracy that will long outlive this present political moment. I would like Democrats and Republicans to both reject censorship. Let's persuade one another. Let's argue about ideas, and then let's come together afterwards.
You can't yell fire in a crowded theater. That's the test. That's the Supreme Court test.
What a stupid
You guys wanted
trope.
to kick people off of
Fire in a
Facebook
crowded
for
theater
saying
is
that
not at all the
toddlers shouldn't
same
have
fucking
not
thing.
Fire in a crowded theater. That is criticizing the policies of the government, which is the right of every American.
Senator, the governor does have the floor for 1 minute to respond to you.
Yeah. Well, I don't run Facebook. What I do know is I see a candidate out there who refused, and now again, and this I'm pretty shocked by this. He lost the election. This is not a debate. It's not. It's
Okay,
not
so he's not in the White
anywhere
House. Okay.
Other than in Donald Trump's world, because look, when Mike Pence made that decision to certify that election, that's why Mike Pence isn't on this stage. What I'm concerned about is, where is the firewall with Donald Trump? Where is the firewall if he knows he could do anything, including taking an election, and his vice president's not going to stand to it? That's what we're asking you, America. Will you stand up? Will you keep your oath of office, even if the president doesn't? And I think Kamala Harris would agree. She wouldn't have picked me if she didn't think I would do that. Because of course that's what
I'm not
we would
getting
do.
paid.
So America,
I
I think
pay
you've got a
to be a
really
citizen.
clear
I
choice
have
on this
no oath of
election
office.
of who's going to honor that democracy and who's going to honor Donald Trump.
Governor, your time is up. Thank you, gentlemen. We will be right back with both of our candidates. The CBS
Give me 1
News
second.
Vice Presidential.
There we
And
go.
by the way, yes, exactly. Folks, I want everybody to remember this as a matter of fact.
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
And tonight we're doing the presidential debate. I'm BZ. Over on the immediate right, Big E Earl Jackson. Directly below me, Lonnie Poindexter. In the lower right corner, Sackhead SHAUN, Big E Jackson from Mission Ready Men, Sackhead SHAUN from Edge of Liberty, and Lonnie Poindexter from Lion Chasers Radio. I appreciate everybody for being here tonight. I'm guessing they have one more segment then before they
30 minutes. I guess we're going to probably do one more with the closing. Remember, we're probably 10 minutes behind, so that would make sense.
Yeah, we're about, I don't think we're that far behind, but we are a little bit behind. That's okay. But the cool thing is that I want to promote for this is, folks, all four of us are going to weigh in on the debate. I have a few things to say and point out, and a few questions to have asked kind of in absentia because I'm not there and the only perfect candidate is me and I'm not running. Having said that, I would like to address some of the issues that were brought up. So to date, at this point, Earl, Lonnie, SHAUN, any thoughts as to how the debate is progressing? I'll start with one, and that is, it seems a little bit less heated and more civil. Thoughts?
Are you going to me first?
Oh, sure.
I didn't know. Well, it's 100%, and part of that is because JD Vance is so smooth. And he's been smooth the entire time. If anyone's getting disheveled, it's been Waltz.
Oh, he started out that way.
I mean, he's a walking shit show.
Anybody else?
I would go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, I would agree. He's a lot smoother, and so it's great to watch him respond. In terms of, and he's done his homework. I'll say that as well.
Oh yeah,
Earl.
Yeah, he's definitely done his homework. He's definitely smoother. He's definitely quicker on his feet, and he's really just outclassing. If this was a boxing match, I mean, he'd be outclassing Tim Walz. It's really not even close. And I gave him a B+ earlier. I might kick that up to an A-.
Yeah, I agree with you. He's acting like a statesman.
Yes.
Yeah, he's doing a great job. He missed a couple of opportunities, but like BZ said earlier, you can't have all answers for everybody. So just based on the way this has gone, and I got to give the moderators credit too. They've been pretty fair. They've been pretty fair, and I'm genuinely shocked by that.
I was kind of I think I'm going where SHAUN is going to go here in a second or two. There was a point in the debate when all of us here heard a question from one of the moderators. I don't remember which, and we thought,
the one on the right.
Did we just hear a semi-fair question asked? And I was shocked.
Yep. I do want to get everyone's grade for them after the fact. I know we still have one more segment. So coming back in right now in 3, 2.5, 2.
Banzai.
Welcome back to the vice presidential debate. It is now time for the closing statement. Senator Vance won the virtual coin toss and elected to go last. So Governor Walz, you are first. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you, Senator Vance. Thank
You're going to have to crank up the volume.
And most importantly, thank you to all of you. If you're still up and the folks who miss Dancing with Our Stars, I appreciate it. But look, the support of the democracy matters.
There we go.
It matters that you're here. And I'm as surprised as anybody of this coalition that Kamala Harris has built, from Bernie Sanders to Dick Cheney to Taylor Swift, and a whole bunch of folks in between there. And they don't all agree on everything, but they are truly optimistic people. They believe in a positive future of this country and one where our politics can be better than it is. And I have to tell you that that better than it is the sense of optimism that there can be an opportunity economy that works for everyone, not just to get by, but to get ahead. And the idea that freedom really means something. Not the freedom of government to be in your bedroom or exam room, but the freedom for you to make choices about yourself. Now, look, we all know who Donald Trump is. He's told us, and as Maya Angelou said, believe him when he told you that. His first inaugural address talked about American carnage. And then he spent 4 years trying to maybe do that. Senator Vance tonight made it clear he will stand with Donald Trump's agenda. He will continue to push down that road. Excuse me. Kamala Harris gives us a different option. Now, I'll have to tell you, I'm going to be careful about the quotes, but there's one that Senator Vance said that does resonate with me. He said, Donald Trump makes the people I care about afraid. A lot of America feels that way. We don't need to be afraid. Franklin Roosevelt was right. All we have to fear is fear itself. Kamala Harris is bringing us a new way forward. She's bringing us a politics of joy. She's bringing real solutions for the middle class, and she's centering you at the heart of that. All the while asking everyone, join this movement, make your voices heard. Let's look for a new day where everybody gets that opportunity and everybody gets a chance to thrive. I humbly ask for your vote on November 5th for Kamala Harris.
Governor Walz, thank you. Senator Vance, your closing statement.
Well, I want to thank Governor Walz, you folks at CBS, and of course the American people for tuning in this evening. And one of the issues we didn't talk about was energy. And I remember when I was being raised by my grandmother, when she didn't have enough money to turn on the heat some nights because Ohio gets pretty cold at night and because money was often very tight. And I believe, as a person who wants to be your next vice president, that we are a rich and prosperous enough country where every American, whether they're rich or poor, ought to be able to turn on their heat in the middle of a cold winter night. That's gotten more difficult thanks to Kamala Harris's energy policies. I believe that whether you're rich or poor, you ought to be able to afford a nice meal for your family. That's gotten harder because of Kamala Harris's policies.
Yes.
I believe that whether you're rich or poor, you ought to be able to afford to buy a house. You ought to be able to live in safe neighborhoods. You ought to not have your communities flooded with fentanyl. And that too has gotten harder with because of Kamala Harris's policies. Now, I've been in politics long enough to do what Kamala Harris does when she stands before the American people and says that on day one, she's going to work on all these challenges I just listed. She's been the vice president for 3.5 years. Day one was 1,400 days ago, and her policies have made these problems worse. Now, I believe that we have the most beautiful country in the world. I meet people on the campaign trail who can't afford food, but have the grace and generosity to ask me how I'm doing and to tell me they're praying for my family. What that has taught me is that we have the greatest country, the most beautiful country, the most incredible people anywhere in the world. But they're not going to be able to achieve their full dreams with the broken leadership that we have in Washington. They're not going to be able to live their American dream if we do the same thing that we've been doing for the last 3.5 years. We need change. We need a new direction. We need a president who has already done this once before and did it well. Please vote for Donald Trump. And whether you vote for me or vote for Tim Walz, I just want to say, I'm so proud to be doing this, and I'm rooting for you. God bless you, and good night.
Senator Vance, thank you.
Wow.
And thank you both for participating in the only
I think that was a
presidential
strong,
debate of this
strong
election cycle.
Yep. Okay, so we know that Walz is not Trump, and he's not Vance. This was a very, gosh, there's a word I want to use. Oh, it was a very conciliatory debate.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I'd like to do is start with everybody here, maybe grading one person one way or the other, and grading the debate overall, because this is, I don't know, who is this going to convince? The bulk of Democrats have already decided where they're going. I submit the bulk of Republicans have already decided where they're going. It's been said, and it's a thing for people to say, well, the independents, it depends on how and where the independents fall in line. So maybe the first question I should ask is, then we'll get into some grades. Was this debate for independents? And if it was it effective? Sean.
Oh yeah, no, it was effective. I think I really think that this will ring with independents, especially in the swing states. And the swing states happen to be where JD Vance is kind of from and around and lives. And I think he connected to a lot of people. Look, JD Vance's story in of itself connects with people. It
Yes.
touches people. Knowing who he is, where he came from, what he has done to get to where he is really moves people. Tonight, what you saw, and you've seen a little bit of this here and there. Tonight, what you saw from JD Vance is a statesman, somebody who will
Yes.
speak eloquently, answer questions, and he did. He answered a lot of questions straight up. Hey, he knew facts, he knew history. He really did a great job of presenting himself, but not from a VP's point of view. He presented himself on a very high level, but did in no way did he try to let his shadow go over Trump, which I think is incredibly a tough balance. He wasn't under Trump, he wasn't over Trump. He stood next to Trump as far as how he presented Donald Trump and presented himself just the same. And I think that is incredibly intelligent, and it is incredibly uh, um, just tactical. So I think he made all of his points at the end, adding energy in when it wasn't asked about specifically, and the importance of energy and really kind of knocking that home, I think
Critical.
was absolutely huge to get that out there. And then his his actual closing remark, nailing Kamala as being the incumbent. She is the VP. She could have done a lot of the stuff and chose not to, is tremendous. And then very heartfelt at the end to voters. I really think that JD Vance is an absolute net positive tonight.
I agree. Earl Jackson, any thoughts about did this happen or manage to sway independence, sir?
I think that independents who genuinely weren't sure, I think if they paid attention to this debate, I think that they probably, if they're honest, would have been swayed to the Trump Vance ticket. I have a hard time believing that there really are that many people who are still undecided, because I think the issues are so stark. I think the situation we're in is so dire right now that anyone who genuinely hasn't made up their mind yet, I just don't think they're paying attention.
No,
and if they're not paying attention, they probably weren't watching this debate.
Oh, hell no. They were watching Survivor.
So if those people do actually exist, I think JD Vance probably won them over, because he was smooth, he was articulate, he was in command of the facts. He didn't obfuscate, he didn't try to escape by any questions. He answered every question that was asked of him. And the same thing cannot be said for his opponent. He wasn't quite as bad as the cackler was, but he was still pretty bad. And I think that, again, if those independents who were watching and were genuinely persuadable do exist, I think they saw that contrast, and they know that the Trump Vance ticket is the way to go at this point.
Okay, Lonnie Poindexter, any thoughts about independence? And I guess, did the football get moved by either side? Did anybody go, oh, now I get it. It makes a difference.
Yeah, I'm in agreement. I don't think that there's anyone that hasn't already. They know who they're pulling the lever for. What I find interesting is that the moderators, and I'll just put it this way: I sure wish that they'd had them as moderators when Trump and Harris were debating, because it was so obviously biased. And I think that's because the powers that be said, okay, we can't be so obvious, so Let's get
Yeah.
we'll have some folks.
Absolutely right.
Yeah, well, folks can go, okay, now this is more the way things should be. But I think folks already know what they're going to do. The independents and so forth that are out there, I think they're already leaning one way or the other. I would hope that it would swing some independents as to pulling the lever for Trump, but and Vance, but I don't see a whole lot of. And let me just point out just what I'm seeing that's happening in the community for folks that have the darker paint job. I've never seen so much in the way of black folks speaking up and throwing rocks at Kamala and her platform, and in particularly with women who we know in the previous election really weren't fielding Trump, but this time around, women are speaking up, and the things that they're stating, I am completely blown away. So I think most folks have already made their decision about what they're going to do. I don't know that this particular debate's going to swing folks one way or the other.
I do want to follow up, and one of the things that Earl brought up is, if you're not already engaged and decided, you're probably not watching, and maybe they're not watching. And if they're undecided and not watching, that doesn't mean that these sound bites won't make their way to social media. These videos. So there is still a net positive of what could come out of this.
Oh yeah, I agree. Yeah.
One of the things that I found interesting is the moderators were a little cagey in terms of going after J.D. Vance. I was surprised that they posed the question to Timpon about he's going to Tiananmen Square. Did he, what did he do? Well, okay, well, Waltz lied about being in Hong Kong during Tiananmen Square during the Tiananmen Square massacre. I would have liked to have seen some questions like this, like to Timpon, for example, why? And I shouldn't have my skirts blown up by this, thinking that, oh, they'll pick this up and they'll run with it. Why did you do almost nothing as Minneapolis burned during the 2020 riots? You didn't take any issue with Kamala Harris fundraising for rioters. Okay, that's a question. Why did you visit China so many times? On whose hook are you doing that? On whose dime?
That would have been a great question.
And why? Now, James Comer, if I'm not mistaken, just presented a bunch of DHS evidence indicating that people there have serious concerns about your ties and directions with communist China. That would have been a nice question. Why did you falsely claim? And this would have resonated with all the veterans. Why did you falsely claim that you carried a weapon of war?
I'm genuinely surprised that didn't come up.
War. That's ripped from the screaming pages of Captain Obvious.
You know why? You know why that didn't come up?
Okay, why?
Because I'll tell you exactly why.
Why?
No. Why would you give him a platform to defend himself? Right? JD could have hit him with that 15 times, but what social media is doing to Waltz on that subject by itself is more than JD could have done up there at the stage, even as a veteran. So the damage is already done for his credibility, and he got nailed again tonight for lying about. Waltz beat himself up. JD did not need to go at him about his credibility. Waltz did it for himself.
Well, yeah, that's kind of true. Knucklehead. You're going to make a T-shirt out of that. I know that.
Oh, it's probably going to be a T-shirt.
But so I guess they're saying that was some kind of compensation, maybe for, some of the guys saying that, by the way, why did you abandon them before deployment to Iraq? Some of the men that served with him. That was okay. I think I understand what your point was. And the other thing is,
well, don't give him the chance to defend it, right? Because he's had all this time to come up with the BS that he would want to throw out for that. So if you bring that up, he now has this formulated defense as to X, Y, and Z and blah, 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 blah. Whereas if you don't bring it up, you don't need to.
well, I saw you with a pen writing stuff down, Sackhead
Yes.
Sean, and I wrote some stuff down too. So one of the things I said is, so, okay, you're talking about healthcare. A big question should have been, okay, so do you still support single payer health care? Why should Americans have to lose their private health care? That was one of the things that I'd written down. And he talked briefly, well, not to any extent that I would have liked to have seen. You meaning Timpon, supported alternatives. I think the phrase that was used was alternatives to policing. So are you with Vice President Kamala Harris, with her in terms of, previous statements indicate, well, maybe police should be defunded and the money customarily that would have been sent to there should be sent to other places. The other thing that, and it was begging for it, maybe, I will admit, maybe this is a cheap shot, but I also wrote down,
I already agree.
Why do you think there should be tampons in boys' bathrooms? To him, that was critical. Why? Now, maybe it seemed like a little bit of a low blow. Get it? See what I did there? But it could have been a question posed appropriately. And then another thing that I wrote down, where's my little piece of paper over here? You have given, Timpon, free college tuition in your state to illegal immigrants there in Minnesota. Do you think illegal invaders nationwide, sir, should get free college? Missed it. And again, I get the whole thing. You can't think of all this stuff. And then this was huge. Because this is documented on the internet. And I played it a number of times. Earl, I bet you have. Sean, I bet you have. And Lonnie, I bet you have too. And that's, Timpon, you have said there is no guarantee to free speech. Why don't you support the First Amendment?
Well, but I think JD went after him on the censorship thing. He actually went back to it twice, if I recall right. He kept saying when they were talking about January 6th, and JD beat him up about being for censorship. So I think that part was actually kind of gone after.
Okay. I also wrote down a couple of other things. Let me see. Move this over here. I think it was claimed, well, this was a falsehood by Biden, for example, that billionaires pay an average of 8.2% in federal taxes. Biden said that during the State of the Union, that the federal tax rate for billionaires is 8.2%, but the actual number is way higher than that.
Mm-hmm.
So do billionaires pay an average of 8.2% in federal taxes? And that's false. The 400, because I looked this up while this was going on, the 400 wealthiest American taxpayers pay an average federal income tax of about 23%.
Yeah.
So, falsehood.
Yeah, we knew that, though.
Yeah.
I agree. Yeah. I'm glad you researched it, but we knew that was bullshit.
So, how much income tax? I wrote this down too and went to go research while everything was going on. How much income tax do the top earners pay? The top 50% of earners contributed to 97.7% of federal income tax, period, end of statement.
Yep.
I know he's not perfect, but I wish that somewhere in his brain housing group that had been percolating around a little bit. I think that was that would have been nice to see and or hear. I think gun deaths in America, 54 point something to 55% of gun deaths in America are from suicides.
Yes.
Okay. Can you just not be so stupid as to do that?
Well, they have to, and this is they always conflate suicides with gun violence, which I think is just absolutely ridiculous, right? Is there a mental health issue? Yes. Do suicides need to be addressed? Yes. Especially amongst our veterans, it needs to be addressed. However, I think the majority of them, and this is something I've noticed with the Democrats the last couple of years, they keep beating on things that I think the vast majority of Americans know is debunked. Look, everybody who is on the progressive Democrat side,
we need
does
to
not
brace
give a
them on
shit. Yeah, but
Sad,
what I'm saying
okay.
is,
all right, sadly,
they don't give
that's
a
true.
shit. You're
That's
not
true.
going to change their mind, right? So you're now talking to independents. Conservatives already know this for the most part, so you're not informing them of anything. So now you're looking towards independence again. If people are truly independent, because I do find the vast majority of independents are kind of educated or educate themselves about the topics for the most part. Not always, but for the most part. And I think they're not buying into that bullshit that the left has been doing, where they're constantly repeating lies and misrepresentation. Look, the left is already in. It does not matter. I'll tell you right now, Joe Biden could go out on the stage tomorrow and take a leak on the press, right? Just whip it out and whiz all over the place, and they would talk about how he was freely expressing himself. Right? There's absolutely, the people on the left are absolutely dyed-wool left, love the left. Does not matter what Joe does. Doesn't matter what Kamala does. Look, Waltz is a buffoon, right? And we all know it. He is a weirdo. He's got huge ties to China. All of these things, the left is still embracing him, right? And they hated him. But you remember, this is the same people who were talking about getting rid of Kamala for Biden because she was hurting his poll numbers until she held a coup. And then all of a sudden, she was the best thing since sliced bread.
With Nancy Pelosi.
Of course. Pelosi pulled
And
the screws on all of that.
So
make no mistakes. Pelosi still runs the vast majority of the Democratic Party.
Don't think that she's massively in charge. The other thing I wanted to point out is, all of us here know that she's going to go for an assault weapons ban.
Oh,
so I started looking up the data. Well, rifles, which is what they call assault rifles, were involved in 3% of firearms murders. Period. End of statement. They are used
hammers, baseball bats, shod feet, hands, all
vehicles
account for more homicides than assault rifles.
That old trope comes back to live with anybody again, or to live with us. I want to put this up on the screen, because if you don't have assault rifles, what do you have? Surgeon stabbings, knife crime worsening in Australia. Imagine that. 10 charts on the rise of knife crime in England and Wales. So, BZ, what is it you're saying? This, and that's that men and women will always find ways and manners to kill themselves and kill others, no matter what you do. I said this during the debate. In the past 60 to 70 years, I'm old enough to remember it. Lonnie's old enough to remember it. Earl, you probably already see it every day. Sean, I bet you've seen it as well. Don't you guys all remember a time when you could go through your various areas and see gun racks in the back of pickup trucks?
Oh, yeah.
Nobody got killed.
Yeah.
We didn't have massive shootings. So the question, the fundamental question still is, in the past 60 to 70 years, what has changed? The tool or society?
Oh, society's changed. We know
And
that.
the answer is clear, but leftists don't want to use that to factor in anything.
Look, there are people that have conventions where they dress like animals that don't exist. Society has changed, right? It's just a fact. I mean, that's 100% thing. Furries are a thing. Society has changed, right?
You're letting them
Sean
in
in the chat room brought,
schools.
yeah, and well, one of the was I think it was in Minnesota. There was a school where they were going to bring in an oversized litter box for somebody
Yeah.
who identifies as a cat. That was
Yeah.
in Tim Walter's state.
That already occurred,
I do want to. Sean brought up a good point in the chat room. He said, "Don't use their word for it." Speaking of assault rifle, and I think part of the reason we do that is because the people we're trying to talk to don't understand what a long gun is.
No,
You could say long gun, and they're going to think it's a shotgun. I agree with you. We've pushed back on it the whole time. They try to make assault rifle a real thing. Any weapon that you use against somebody can be considered assault. I have an assault pen in my hand. Blah 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 blah. I agree with you. I understand what you're saying, but we're also trying to speak to people who don't understand the difference between all of them.
This is an assault.
And I'd rather the facts right now be more important than the statistics than the name of it. We can work on the name eventually.
Exactly. This is, don't tell anybody, this is an assault monster drink.
Yes, because I know where that goes when you're done with this. So,
hey. Don't think I'm not watching you, mister.
Sorry, that's on me.
I'm watching
That's on me.
you. So it's like I certainly agree with that. Sean, you have to use the terminology that they're using. And I was frequently asked, well, why do you quantify everything as racist or sexist? Or why do you call people BZ racist and sexist? That's their leftists' terminology. Democrats, leftists, and globalists. Those are the terms upon which they banter. So in order to speak their lingo, I have to do that as well. Now I grok the concept of what Sean is doing in chat, saying that, yeah, don't use their words. Okay, I understand that comment, but
we have to have the conversation to the point and not fluff.
Yeah, I have to be able to reply to that in some fashion in order to address that issue. So first, I'm going to ask everybody if there's anything additional.
I have a question.
Sure.
I do have a question for the panel. First of all, really quick, starting with Earl, BZ, and then Lonnie.
Okay.
What would you rate the moderators number letter-wise?
I would give him a B.
Mm-hmm.
I would give him a
okay.
B.
Wow. Jeez.
Shockingly,
Texas, high grader.
I wouldn't have expected that, and I may be grading them on a bit of a curve too, but they surprised me quite a bit, especially pushing back on Tampon Tim the way they did.
Let me ask this
I
question.
agree.
What do you think would have been the results, or how affected would that have been had the previous debate been monitored by those two individuals instead of whatever the hell he was and Cammie's good sorority sister?
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I mean, it would have outlandishly changed it. BZ, what grade are you given?
Heavy sigh. Well, because moderators and I are not particularly like this. Most moderators I give a D-. I'd give maybe a strong C. And that's with me that it's kind of pulling me that way. And so Lonnie, what do you think?
Yeah, I'm between a C+ and a B-. Go back and forth.
Yeah,
it's just refreshing, and looking back to the previous moderators during Trump and Harris is probably why I lean more towards the a B-, just in their delivery, and but again, this goes back to, it was so obviously biased in the previous debate with Trump and Harris, that I figured that the powers that be says, well, we got to do something, so it's not so blatantly obvious that that we're in support of the Harris camp.
I agree with that, and my grading's a B minus. Couple things that I think knocked them down on is when she tried to fact check on JD, and that only happened once, and he had to push back.
Yep,
But he did push back. But I will, and the other reason they got points off is there was a few ways they phrased the question, a la Senator Vance, we know that Trump's a horrible person. Please explain why. And then going over to Waltz and say, please tell us why Waltz is wrong and he's actually a more horrible person than what Waltz said. So they did have a couple of those questions, but overall, as far as moderation, even for the last 8 years, I will have to say it was probably the closest to even. I mean, it's still it's not even. But as far as modern media has done, this is probably one of the best moderated debates that we've had in a long, long time.
Yeah, for sure.
They were good about cutting both off equally. I was paying attention to that. You could hear their beeper go off. They did let both of them finish sentences when it was time, or when they were mid-sentence and there was time for them to change out. They let them both finish. It seemed like a fairly even amount. And they also allowed comments when it was appropriate. I think there was a few times they probably could have let JD answer once or twice, but overall, I think they allowed follow-ups in a very equitable way.
So let me ask this then. Tomorrow, the chatter is starting right now, but I'm talking about when everybody really gets going, their social media and the American media maggots, their news going tomorrow. Do you guys think that there will be any kind of a noted or marked display of, this was a pretty clear indication that for whatever reason, CBS was a lot more moderate or conciliatory than those other guys were on ABC? Do you think anybody tomorrow is going to insert into the conversation, wow, we almost had kind of a fairly civil and a little bit of equanimity inserted into this debate? Do you think that's going to make any kind of rise its ugly head tomorrow in media?
No, because in their heads, the only reason it was like that is because Trump wasn't on stage. That's what they're telling themselves tomorrow, is that if Trump was on stage, they'd have to be more aggressive, but because they weren't, that's the only reason why they were able to be conciliatory. They'll blame Trump for it.
Okay. Then it leads then to this question, another if-then equation. Okay. Who is going to say, or maybe in any kind of an expressed percentile, how many people are going to say, oh, that Waltz Timpon walked away with it?
There'll be tons of that, I think.
Go ahead.
No, I'd say I think there'll be tons of that, because that's just how the media rolls.
Okay. Mm-hmm. So you think that basically, I'm sorry, Earl, go ahead.
I don't know. I don't know that that's going to happen, because it was clear. It was very obvious that he didn't fall all over himself like Biden did. Mm-hmm. I think it was fairly obvious that JD Vance got the better of Tim Walz, and what I think is going to happen is that it's going to get swept under the rug. You'll have some news outlets like Newsmax and Fox, and maybe even News Nation, because I've actually been fairly impressed with them lately. I think they'll mention it, but I think overall the CNNs and the MSDNCs of the world, I don't think that they're going to spend a whole lot of time on it, because they know that Waltz didn't do himself or Kamala any favors.
Exactly. I agree.
What you're saying is that by the end, let's say by Thursday, that this literally will be yesterday's news. This debate,
Yeah.
memory hold as much as humanly possible.
Yeah, because of that and the fact that it was a vice presidential debate, and even though I think this has more consequence because of Trump's age and because of the fact that Trump won't be able to run again, and so there's going to have to be somebody younger, more vigorous, more conservative to take the mantle and run with it. I think it has more consequence in that respect. But overall, vice presidential debates really don't move the needle much.
Ooh! That just made me. Okay, I want to wrap this up in the not too terribly distant future, unless you guys have something more to insert. But when Earl was speaking, that made me think, because you made a very accurate statement. This is it for Trump. This is it. He said, I do it now or I don't do it anymore. At 78,
Correct.
soon to be 79. I mean, that's it. It's a given. He's done. He's gone. Another if-then equation. If Trump is gone, then whom do you think, at least on the Republican or the conservative side, begins to attempt to formulate their own masses for 2028? Or who do you guys favor that you'd like to see start to begin to fasten their role, to make it a little bit faster and start to, because a good campaign starts now for 2028. Thoughts? Anybody? Bueller? Can I go first?
I'll go first if we're going to go down the line.
All righty.
Yeah. So first and foremost, I think JD Vance just interviewed for the spot for the future.
Yeah.
I think I really think that was it. I think that was his interview, and the people will decide. I want to see, and I, as a commentator, I want to see the excitement for JD Vance post-election versus going into the election. Just because he's on the ticket with Trump, he's going to get a bump one way or the other.
Okay.
Do I think that tonight specifically set JD up for success in the future within the party? Absolutely. I really do. I think that he embraces a lot of the conservative values, maybe not as conservative as in some places. But I think that he speaks to a lot more people than people are giving him credit for. I think he touches a lot of people that not like Biden, but I think he gets to a lot of people that a lot of other people would not be able to. And I think that sets him up for the future.
Would the term or phrase statesman-like be applicable?
Yes.
Is that
Yes.
something
Yeah.
that we should consider? That
Yes,
should
100%.
be a factor in the future that
eh,
perhaps people are thirsting for. Is this what
Yes.
people want, do you think?
Yes.
Yeah, wholeheartedly yes.
Yeah.
Okay, Lonnie, any thoughts about? Oh, wait, Earl, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Lonnie.
Yeah, I'm thinking. I was just jotting down. It's he's more Kennedy-esque, if we can think back to when JFK was running for office, and media really came into the forefront in terms of he was doing so much better than who he was competing against, because, and putting down the notes, and he has a full head of hair. These kinds of things. They you wouldn't think that would have impact with people, but us Americans, we're the well, I would say TV generation, certainly media generation, and so how you look and what you say, and he
Well.
appears to me to be a very eloquent speaker. So we're looking for that. If we just go back and think about Barack Obama, eloquent speaker, full head of hair, those types of things, and that's what resonated with people. Nobody knew what the hell his positions were, but at least in the community, for the folks that had the darker paint job, he had the look that was down. And I think for the better part of America, I think Vance certainly is. It's a pre-interview for the future. It'll be interesting to see how he fares when he's dealing with the establishment there in D.C. and and how they like to roll, and and maybe that they'll push back on him. And I just hope he doesn't morph into and become a part of the establishment
Agreed.
that's in DC. But certainly, yeah, I think it was I'm in agreement with SHAUN that it was a pre-interview.
Okay. Earl, have any thoughts about that?
Can I just comment really quick on what Lonnie said about the full head of hair? And this is not a joke. The amount of women and that I in my timeline on X right now that are swooning over JD Vance is not to be underestimated. And I understand that there's a separation between voting politics and what they might find attractive, but there is definitely something to be said about somebody who people do not mind looking at.
Sad but true.
Face made for radio, not for TV. And by the way, do you not understand when you ever see this face on my show, it's always covered with a hat. There you go. Thank you very much. So we seem to have some unanimity in terms of, we like JD Vance. We agree that some people are sufficiently shallow as to predicate their votes on, it's true, sufficiently shallow to predicate their votes on looks. You got to admit, it worked for JFK with Joe Kennedy, kind of ramming some crap in behind at the time.
It's working for Mussolini, too.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, Mr. Oil Hair. Now, well, I don't know. Sackhead Sean, you're in the belly of the beast. Is Gavin Newsom doing all that well right now?
No, he's not. Actually, he's overplayed his hand.
Yeah.
He's overplayed his hand. When you're about to lose a referendum with 70% of the state wanting to vote for a proposition, I can't remember the last time 70% of the state in California agreed that getting free money was nice. So it tells you, I'll tell you right now, I don't know if Gavin, the BS that he pulled here, I do not think is going to play, especially after this election. I said this earlier this week. I think the pendulum on progressivism is really almost at its apex, and it's going to start ticking back here slowly. We see little signs here and there with people that the woke, the progressive, when New York Times writes an article saying woke may be dying and this is why it's a bad thing, that tells you that they even know that pendulum's starting to swing back because progressives will play their hand, and Newsom was one of the biggest betters on progressivism.
Okay, so do you think then, Sean, that now I'm guessing you're talking about Prop 36, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Can you describe to people, because I'm going to do a separate show on 47 and 57 in detail, but do you think that 36, which basically gets rid of all the stupid crap that occurred under 47 and 57, in other words, minimizing penalties, taking some felonies and kicking them down to misdemeanors, and also raising the limitations of, it used to be 487 PC, which was grand theft, to a ceiling of about $900 to $1,000, depending upon which county you're in. And the people thinking about, 36 says maybe we need to go back before 47 and 57. Is that the biggest?
Well, it was 47
right now.
But don't forget about AB 109. That was the predicate for all of the other ones, because AB 109 was the one where they started
realignment.
Yep. And you remember this. Prisoners down to the county jail and overwhelming the county jails. They took them out of state prisons. And the other thing, too, is they pretty much said there's no such thing as probation and parole anymore. You'll technically be on it, but the odds you getting violated are slim to none because our county jails are so full, we can't take it. So then you go to Prop 47, which decriminalized a lot of stuff. It lowered a lot of thresholds. We got rid of 666, which, for people don't know, 666 PC in California, if you got arrested 3 times for shoplifting, the third time's a felony. If you had to be convicted and do a day on each one of the first charges, third one becomes a felony. That was a major deterrent. I will tell you, working in the private sector around retail, that when Prop 47 kicked 666 out and entering with intent to steal being a burglary, they changed the language on that. Shoplifting went absolutely through the roof.
And property crimes are nuts.
That's when you first started seeing the walk-in swarms, and it was only 2 or 3 people, but what they were doing is they would just start walking in and grabbing stuff because they knew nothing was going to happen to them. So yeah, now you see Prop 36, which Newsom tried to do the little BS last month where he signed the kind of a stopgap bill on a couple of different things here and there. And he's trying to downplay Prop 36. He just said last week in an interview, I don't even recognize this state, when he was told the percentages or asked about the percentages being 73% for Prop 36. So as I said before, I truly think that the pendulum is just starting to swing out a little bit.
I would agree, Sean. Here's a good indicator. I was watching. I follow California Insider.
Which is great show. Great show.
And they had one of the experts within the wine and spirits industry, in particularly the wine industry. And the wine industry is imploding. And so I jotted down little notes. I said, oh, that's an indicator there, because they've created an environment where the wineries are so heavily regulated and what have you that they can't compete with stuff from all over the world. And then you have wineries that are importing bulk wine. Now, we have grapevines and vineyards everywhere in the state of California. Wherever the weather is permitting, they're there. But the wineries,
that's why Napa is Napa.
Yeah, they are buying their bulk wine from elsewhere in the world. Chile, you name the province, because it's cheaper. And so those who are growing grapes here in the state of California can't compete with that. And so you got wineries that are for sale and some that will be going bankrupt. So I was amazed by that. That's on Newsom's watch, and I think that that they're going to be dealing with him on that. So I agree with you, Sean. I think the pendulum is about to swing. If I just watch in social media, what I do with EBLM is I follow their social media, and I'm looking at the commentary coming from folks, and a whole lot of folks are upset with the way things are, and so they're going to be voting accordingly.
Here's something very interesting. Now, we determined I was very close and would work with an individual who had been aligned with the state of California in terms of enabling cannabis. And California, always spelled with a K, thought that it was going to cut a big ass chunk out of a horse by enabling cannabis. We're going to tax the crap out of it. We're going to manage the crap out of it. This is going to be a cash cow for California. And here's what happened. All the private growers became strong again. And all the cartels were having wars with the private people. Yeah. And all the big pharma that thought that it was going to come in and cut another big fat horse, another big fat hog out of California, that didn't emerge as well. So do you know what's waiting in the wings? It's this. California is going to start to allow Amsterdam-like dope cafes, dude, dope cafes. Then the other fact, because Sean, I hadn't thought about what you'd said in terms of wineries, but this is probably waiting in the wings because of that. If DEA goes to some kind of a big marijuana shift, then California and all the other little leftist states like Colorado, whatever, are going to take advantage of that. So if DEA pulls dope off the schedule, I don't know what the credibility is. There are the possibility of that. Well, probably pretty good under Kamala Harris, probably not so bueno under OMB. But that stuff has got to be waiting in the wings too.
Mm. Well, and the other things you have to look at with cannabis and what happened in the state. First of all, I think it's absolutely hysterical that they hated big tobacco until they wanted to commence. For people that don't know, big tobacco is in the marijuana industry in this country, crazy. So they hated it
Yeah.
until they could find a new way to tax it. You still can walk down the street smoking a joint in this state, but you can't walk down the street drinking a beer in most cities. I could walk down the street naked smoking a joint in Sacramento, and nobody could legally stop me as long as I wasn't aroused. True story, not making that up.
No.
However, if I'm walking down the street with the beer, technically they could stop me and cite me for it. Now, would they? Most Sacramento cops are way too busy for that. But the fact that it's there is a problem. The other thing that's being ignored dramatically, because they tax the shit out of it, and this shows you what happens when you overtax an industry. Where have people gone to purchase marijuana? They go back to the local street dealers because it's cheap.
Got it.
It proves what happens when you overtax and you force people to go underground. It's back to bootlegging again. It's bootlegging 101. It's really what it is. And what you don't hear about is the amount of violence in these grows that are hidden in the mountains, especially up in the
Mendocino,
northwest.
Humboldt.
Mendocino, yep.
You got it.
There is if you stumble, there are absolutely stories of people who have stumbled on a grow and have been shot and killed without even knowing what they stumbled on, because they are so well guarded up there, and they shoot first and ask questions later.
And Mendocino and Humboldt are two of the largest counties, I should say, in terms of missing people.
Yep.
What? Now, if I had had a producer, what you would have heard is shocking counties missing people. Are you serious? You can't be serious, producer. Can you help me out here, producer? But I don't have a producer, so that's not what you heard.
I was trying.
I know. from a distance. From a distance. So let me throw one final thing out. It seems that we have some unanimity in terms of there seems to be a future for J.D. Vance, that he accommodated himself fairly well tonight. He made a good presentation, and that will be a positive and a plus for him and for the party too. Would you go so far as to say? Anybody?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
I think if he can resist a lot of the temptations of the swamp and stay out of that, and maintain his conservative bona fides, I think he could be one of the pillars of the future of the party. And as like I said, as long as he maintains those conservative ideals and doesn't get caught up with the money and the power of it all, like so many do, I think he could be good.
Okay, so everybody here basically says that he made a good account of himself.
Agreed.
We have
I agree.
Agreement on that. Okay. Another if-then equation. If J.D. Vance is, let's just assume that you'll see a lot more of him in the future. You know, like my college professors used to say, you may see this material again, as everybody scribbles down what the dude just said. Anybody else that you think that is waiting in the wings or present who would also potentially make a future good account for themselves come 2028?
Go ahead.
Let me throw one thing in. Let me throw this name in, and it either sets people off and there's revulsion, or people say, yeah, I kind of like that guy, Vivek Ramaswamy.
Yeah. I was thinking of him. The first person I was thinking of would have been him.
Okay. Now, Earl, any thoughts on Vivek Ramaswamy? Yes, no, maybe so. Kind of meh, not sure. Too slick.
I love the way he just destroys interviewers I just love the way he brings the facts with all the leftist American Pravda media when they try to come at him. I'm still not sold yet. Would I have voted for him if Trump had picked him as his VP? Absolutely. But I want to see a few more years before I say, yeah, he'll be in the mix in 2028.
Okay, so
I agree. It's
too
staying
new,
power.
too young, too fresh, not
Too untested.
Good. He's verbose, but what's he done and what's he going to do? Those kind of
Well,
questions.
Yeah.
Well, oh, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead, John.
And my thing too is he may be on the train a little bit too late. I think one of the things you brought this up
Late. Wow.
with JD Vance being a statesman, I've said this before, and I love the fact that I got so much pushback on this in the past from people. I said we as a nation are getting look, Trump is the president that we needed when we had him, and we need him again.
Yes.
But the bombastic portion of politics, people are going to get tired of.
Yep.
And we need somebody who can do both, cross the bridge when it's time to be bombastic, but not do it in the same Trumpish way, which Vivek gets a little Trump-like when he's pushing back, right? He's smart, he's intelligent, but he fights on everything, which I appreciate, but I don't know if that's going to play much longer in this country. Look, Trump was the bull we needed in the China shop because they were burning down the China shop. I agree with that right now, too. Trump is the bull we need in the China shop because they're burning down the China shop. If we're looking beyond Trump, as I said, JD Vance looked as a statesman tonight. It was a good interview for him. Does that mean he's the only one? Absolutely not. You got Byron Donalds out there.
Yeah.
And I think Byron Donalds is a huge rising star. Tim Scott's still out there, and I think a lot of people still like him. Now, whether or not you agree with him or that he's a good candidate, I don't necessarily, I'm talking from a voter's perspective strictly. People that will catch on. And I think those are your next. Vivek is there, and Vivek may be a vice presidential candidate to kind of show that he can have staying power. I don't think that Ron DeSantis is going to ever come out of Florida again. I think he did himself a lot of damage when he ran, but I also think it's the double-edged sword. He's such a damn good Florida governor that I don't think that he can leave Florida at this point. I think he has to stay there. So I don't.
Isn't he going to be term limited though? Isn't he?
Yeah, but he has. I think he has one more term, doesn't he? I think he gets one more run at it.
Okay.
Does Florida? Okay. Does Florida have gubernatorial term limits?
Yeah, I think it's 2.
I think so. Yeah.
Okay, I wasn't aware of that. Okay, so basically, what you're saying is that maybe Ramaswamy needs to have paid some political dues and needs some seasoning because he hasn't, to my knowledge, he has not been installed ever into any kind of a political position. Is that kind of your
no, I don't think that. I think he needs to prove that he's in it to win it long term and that he is who he says he is. I'm not saying I actually do not want him to get political dues paid. I want him to stay being Vivek Ramaswamy and not suddenly change when the wind turns or when the wind blows next.
Okay, Earl, you were about to say something.
With respect to Ramaswamy, I'd like to see him in some kind of appointed position, whether it's cabinet or something else,
yes.
to get the political bona fide, so to speak. With respect to DeSantis, he did himself no favors when he was campaigning, but the guy that he became afterwards, in the interviews he did after he was no longer under the pressure of being the candidate, it was like a completely different guy. And that guy probably could have done a lot better. And if he can somehow harness that in the future, he could be. I mean, Sean's right. He may be stuck in Florida forever, but if he can somehow harness that energy that he's had since he left the campaign trail, it could be interesting to see.
I make a very interesting point, and I don't remember who said it. Maybe it was Sean or Earl, in terms of Byron Donalds or
Yeah.
Tim Scott, I have to admit, I gotta go with Byron Donalds.
Me too.
Sorry,
Yeah.
I really do.
I was just throwing out
the
names
dude-
that are potentially out there.
Exactly. So since we're talking about names, also,
Lonnie, do you have a name?
we threw JD Vance, we threw Ramaswamy, maybe kind of sort of, DeSantis not so much. Lonnie, any other individuals who may resonate with yourself, sir?
No, not to add to who you all are speaking of, Byron Donald, certainly. I would throw him into the mix. I was thinking about the lieutenant governor in North Carolina, but
The female?
No, not Virginia. You're thinking of Winsome Sears. BZ.
Yes, Winsome. Yes.
Yeah. Winsome is sharp. She's a sharpie,
she
but
is.
I'm thinking North Carolina. Oh God, what's his name? Lieutenant Governor.
Mark Robinson.
Yeah,
Thank
Mark
you.
Robinson. And who they are throwing rocks at and looking to set him up. And put mud on him, and in my opinion, it's so obvious that it's a setup, but it's enough to muddy the waters for him. I think maybe this election cycle. What really upsets me is the GOP people, and I'm a GOP guy. They are quick to run and throw you under the bus if any kind of, they did it to Trump, and they're doing it to him as well. I don't trust anything coming out of mainstream media. So
absolutely not.
Yeah, so the stuff they're accusing him of, it's so ridiculous that it can't hardly make any kind of sense. But this is the world that we live in. So that's the only name that maybe I would throw up. But when I think about him, he's maybe not quite ready for presidential, but certainly he'd be probably a decent governor.
There's a couple of other interesting names that I want to throw out there. One,
okay, please.
One I mentioned earlier, and her performance in her Senate race right now, notwithstanding, but I love watching Carrie Lake handle the media. She is absolutely amazing, and I'm really shocked
the media.
that she's not. Yeah, exactly. I'm really shocked that she's not doing better, and I have to believe just because of the way she handles herself and the policies that she's espoused, that there's something fishy going on there. With respect to Winsome Sears, I've actually met her. I met her through my dad at an event, and I liked her before I met her. I mean, I still like her personally, but I just wasn't terribly impressed when I did meet her. And the people that she has around her, I don't think are doing her any favors. Mm-hmm. And I think that she's going to have, if she keeps those people around her they're distancing her from people who've been loyal to her and stuff like that, I think that's going to be a problem for her if she tries to rise the ranks in GOP politics.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I don't know, maybe a little bit more thought into this, but have we left anybody major out? I mean, are we? Oh, let me throw this up for a potential final question.
No.
Youngkin?
No.
I'm just talking about names that may pop up down the line.
Okay. Any other names that you can think of? Because I have a final question for tonight, because I think we're on the cusp of some important stuff. I mean, discounting Israel, discounting Ukraine, discounting China and Taiwan and North Korea and Iran and Israel, and the dock strike. Oh my God, the stuff we could talk about, the foolishness that weakness engenders. We'll talk about that for another day, but we're on the cusp of something else that I think is very important. And then I'd like you guys to weigh in.
I don't think I know where you're going with this, but go ahead.
Legacy politicians are moribund. And after this year, will we see a return? In other words, Biden is gone. If Trump doesn't win, Trump is going to be gone. Feinstein's dead. How long can Pelosi hang on?
Well, she's pickled.
Yeah. Yeah. Almost as much as I am, but not exactly quite. So are we on the cusp of seeing a lot of the elder legacy politicians just fall away?
Yeah,
I think so.
I would say so.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree. And I think the other thing that's going to start hurting them is, Trump has shown, and even JD Vance, because he's only been a senator for a short amount of time, Trump has shown that you don't need legacy politicians to run a country. And I think that resonates with people, especially as someone said in chat earlier, when we're talking about congressional term limits and the age of some of these people, and people despise that, you may not have to instill term limits per se, because people may not be voting for legacy politicians anymore. Trump's not a legacy politician. I mean, he's just not. Just because he was a president for 4 years, he wasn't a senator and all that stuff going up to it. I think that resonates with people.
Well, this is so much material for another show. Trump was Trump. I don't think we're going to ever see another Trump. We're not going to see anybody who we love to hate and we hate to love. And everybody at one point, myself included, was probably screaming at their TV during something stupid that he said and say, would you just take a big cup of shut the fuck up and stick to your policies, OMB, would you please? Yet, who else had the temerity to buck up, sit in front of a bunch of EU assholes and tell them, you suck up NATO, or I'm going to do my very level best to kill it. We're paying 25% of the UN. If you don't pick up your responsibility, it's going to go to Brussels. It's going to take somebody Trump-like to be able to do that. I'm mean tweets. So sorry about mean tweets. But like Sean said, he was the dude that needed to do what he did when he did, and we need him now. But we better not be stupid, silly, or fattening. We better have somebody else in the wings, or a series of somebodies, or we are well and truly fucked.
We need to have a series of somebody's waiting in the wings, but we also need to make sure that we take the House and Senate. Otherwise, it's just going to be executive actions. And if our preferred candidate loses in the next 4 years, they're just going to rescind it, and we'll be right back where we started.
Oh my God! Sir. Huge words, Earl. Huge words. Down ballot everything, folks.
Yeah.
Down ballot. Okay, am I missing anything? Did we not discuss something that perhaps we should have?
No, I think we rounded all the bases.
Okay. Final words, Sackhead Sean.
Look, I think this is a good performance by JD Vance. I think that I think it's kind of good for America to see a conciliatory debate, even if it's fairly fruitless, because like you said, early voting started, people have already decided. But I think it will sway people who may still be engaged but on the fence, because there are those people out there, however small, but those small numbers could decide swing states. So I think it was a good debate. I think he handled himself well. I think that him being a statesman may actually turn him on, and he was very statesman-like tonight, as we said. I think will turn him on to a lot of people who maybe would have stayed home tonight otherwise. So, there will be people that vote because they want him to have a future. So, I think it was a win for the Trump Vance campaign all the way around. I think Tim Walz, I gave JD Vance an A-. There's a couple things he could have done better. I gave Tim Walz a C for the night. I think and the reason he got a C is because he didn't fully lose his shit and piss his pants, which I was really expecting. And but he definitely, when you say, what do you say? I made friends. I made friends with the school shooter, and I'm a knucklehead. I'm sometimes. A knucklehead.
That's a T-shirt, baby. I see it coming.
And he did not present the ideas well. I had people text me saying, I don't even know what the hell this guy is saying. It was very convoluted, and I don't think he scored any points for them.
No.
Okay. Earl, any final thoughts on debate tonight or whence we are going at this point?
I agree with Sean. J.D. Vance acquitted himself quite well tonight. And if there are people out there who were undecided, he probably did sway them. I also gave him an A-. I think I gave Walls a C- because he didn't fall flat on his face. But the bar, and I was exactly what I was about to say. The bar was so low anyway that he didn't really have to do much except not basically crap his pants on the stage. I think the future is bright with JD Vance. I think that if we can get Trump and Vance in the White House and win the Senate and the House and actually get some things done, I think the future is bright. And of course that's what I'm praying for, because otherwise, and I said this in my show that's going to post tomorrow, we won't recognize the country. And I mean, those of us who are Gen Z and older already don't recognize the country that we grew up in. But if we screw up and allow them to cheat and get into the White House, we really will not recognize the country that we're living in another 4 years. And that's a proposition that we have to avoid at all costs.
Oh, absolutely. Lonnie Poindexter, any thoughts about the debate tonight or where you think we're going?
I'm pretty much in agreement with what's been previously stated. One name I would throw out, we were talking about potential candidates, and I'm not saying that I'm a fan of him, but folks are telling me that I'm folks, some of my inner circle, they think Mark Cuban's gonna throw his hat in the ring to run for president.
Okay.
He's got no more mountains to climb, so
that would be interesting to watch.
Yeah.
Let me throw this excrement in the punch bowl. Tulsi Gabbard, Elon Musk.
Ineligible.
Yeah, he's in it.
Oh, okay. That's right.
Yeah.
Good point.
Yeah.
That's right.
Tulsi Gabbard, yeah.
He is a true African.
Yeah.
Tulsi Gabbard's a potential. If she, and look, I tell everybody too, when you talk about Tulsi, remember, Trump was a Democrat, Reagan was a Democrat. As people grow older, they grow up. And it's very, very possible she's come pretty far right from even when she was just a rep. We've all become, I think, as you get to a certain age, you start embracing conservatism a lot more. A lot of people like me were smart enough to do it young. A lot of people, it took them a little while to come along.
I was watching Rush Limbaugh when I was 15, so.
Look, why do you think I was looking at you? Why do you think I was looking at you? Look, I know you were watching Rush because we were listening to Rush in the truck together. So don't even I wasn't even looking at you, dude. No, but I think that if she stays on the course that she is now, she actually could be a leader on the conservative side of things. There are some things she'll never be a true conservative on. And that doesn't, I'm a big believer that it's a big tent, but as long as the core values stay, then, okay, as long as the core values are there. But I think she has a potential to be a lot bigger than anyone's given her credit for.
She's coming along. When she first left the Democrat Party and started spouting some conservative ideas, I wasn't sold. Her stance on the Second Amendment her continued stance on the Second Amendment, she hasn't wavered on it, is giving me some hope. I'm gonna have to have her come around on abortion before I can get behind Tulsi. If she can,
I think
if she can shed her radical stance on abortion, that's in line with everyone else on the left. Then yeah, I'll be a big supporter of hers.
Okay, let me ask this question too. God, I keep coming up. I'm sorry.
I thought that was the
guys.
last one.
I keep coming up with questions. Come on,
It's fine. I'll have dinner when I die.
All right. Okay. All right. I'll hurry this along. So Tulsi Gabbard, Vivek Ramaswamy, are we gonna consider guys like, I don't know, like Jordan or Gates or anybody like that, or are they just too yesterday, too kind of smarmy, too kind of squishy? We're not ready to go there yet. Are they too, I don't know what's the word I'm looking for, establishment to even really consider for anything? Or do they just need to stay where the hell they are?
Yeah, I think they should stay.
Just throwing it out there.
I think they're too establishment. I don't know if I could trust them on the national stage. They've been fine where they're at. Gates, I don't know if like I said, they're fine where they're at. Gates, I think, has damaged his reputation on a national stage. And I mean, he hasn't damaged it, but they've damaged him to the point where I don't think he could have.
Oh, he's damaged it too, though. He's done some damage to himself. There's no doubt.
And
yeah, maybe a little bit.
Oh, no, he has. He comes off as a dickhead. That's the biggest problem. And not a dickhead like Trump does, where it's like, I might be a dickhead, but I'm solving problems. It's, I'm a dickhead just to be a dickhead.
Yeah.
And that does not rub people well. That doesn't. Jim Jordan can be a jerk when it's time to be a jerk, when he has somebody on the dais and he's asking questions and he's doing what he's supposed to be doing. I think Jim Jordan would actually be a great speaker. I really think, but he stays in that sphere. He stays in Congress. I think Matt Gaetz is a dickhead. I think everybody knows he's a dickhead. And look, I've said this before, and I started to get rumblings during the SAVE Act. It was, as much as I agreed that McCarthy was garbage, it was not the right time to pull that shit. We were starting to get into a presidential election. We should have been coalescing as a party at that time.
Yeah.
And Matt Gaetz went rogue and potentially screwed a lot of things up because of how long that took to organize. Look at how disorganized that made the party itself look. And it went on for way too long. And then for us to get Johnson was not like a tremendous success. It was barely a net gain, if maybe a little bit of a net gain. It wasn't like we got Jim Jordan, you know what I mean, or Steve Scalise, or somebody where they have teeth. You know, I don't think Johnson's the worst we could have done, but he certainly was not a big enough improvement over McCarthy to have that fight right then. That was personal, and he put Gaetz put himself above the progression and potentially an election. And I think that there's no room in the tent for the people like that.
Yeah, I had high hopes once the situation started to unfold. I had high hopes for Johnson, just because of his Christian perspective and the things that he was saying. But when it came down to it, he was just as much of a cowardly rhino as the rest of them, and I am completely disappointed and disgusted with him. And you're right, we should have left well enough alone and just come together as a party with McCarthy, as bad as he was, and avoided a lot of the nonsense that happened because of it.
And the one thing McCarthy did do well that Johnson doesn't do well is fundraise. So at least we were getting something for the party out of McCarthy. He's a good fundraiser. He did that well. That is something that's needed. I also think, you know, the thing with Johnson that I think is like the biggest problem with him is, instead of, I would have had more respect for him if he came out and said, hey, we're not going to have the SAVE Act conversation per se, because it's just going to blow up in our face and we're going to have to pass it. I don't like it, but I'd respect it if he at least said that. Like, Why are we going to shut down the government and have this put on us because we know the mainstream media is going to put this on us a month out of the election? Right? He wasn't even smart enough to play politics on that. Take a little hit internally, but nationally, at least it would have pushed us forward. If we're talking about how this election is so important and it needs to be won, then as much as we don't always want to play the game of politics because we think they suck, we still have to play the game of politics in order to beat what is there right now. And the Democrats win at that every single time they're entrenched. So, I think the thing that should have been focused on, and Johnson should have came out right away and said, hey, how come the budget is coming up ironically just before an election once again? Why did they set us up to have this fight right now when it was why? Why did we agree to this? Why did this happen? Why did McCarthy do this? And sidestep the whole thing would have been politically more intelligent.
Yeah.
Well, we should have danced with the one we brung. It's essentially what everybody is saying.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I think it's time to wrap up at this point. So, oh no, it isn't. I have two more names to throw out there. What does anybody think of either Tom Cotton, Josh Hawley?
I think they're great where they are.
Of those two on the national stage, I think I'd go with Hawley. But yeah, Sean's got a point that where they're good where they're at right now.
Okay. You concur, Sean?
Yeah, Lonnie.
Okay, Lonnie, any thoughts about that? Josh Hawley.
Yeah.
Okay. Apparently not blowing up your skirts very much. I can tell. You're not so very interested in them boys.
Here's a name that I'd like to throw out there.
Okay.
What about Ted Cruz?
Ted got my gig when we were talking primary back in 16. I was a Ted Cruz guy until I came around to Trump.
Right.
So anybody else? Well, wait a minute. Let's start with Earl because you're there. So what do you think, Earl?
Before Trump, I was a Cruz guy.
Yep.
I like Cruz, but I have some information, and he's not going to run.
Okay. For president.
For president, he's not going to run.
Okay. Then corollary B question. My understanding is that he's having some kind of an issue with his current campaign. Is that true or a bunch of crap?
He's ahead. His campaign is not doing as well as you would think, considering the state of the border here in Texas, and the issues that his opponent, and I can't think of his name off the top of my head.
No, I can't either.
Yeah, Allred. His stances on gender diluted boys and girls bathrooms and all the rest of that, and his open border policies. Cruz should be wiping the floor with him.
Yeah.
Cruz should be doing better against him than he did against O'Rourke. And it's just not happening. And I don't know if that's the people he has in his campaign. I don't know if that's the influx of leftists from California and other leftist states that have taken root in the cities, Dallas, Houston, and Austin especially. I just don't know.
So riddle me this. Usually if somebody was doing fairly well and now they're not, it's either one of two things. It's either personal or policy. So is there something personal?
It could be personal because Ted Cruz, he's a nice guy. My dad's actually met him and I won't say friends, but they're good acquaintances. And one-on-one, apparently he's really good, but he can come across, and we've all seen it in certain situations, he can come across as aloof and as the smartest guy in the room, and he knows it type of thing, even though that's not the way he is, but he can come off that way. And so if it is personal, that could be it.
I've said that for a long time about him. Is his biggest problem is, and it's not that I agree with you, E. It's not that he is a jerk, but he sometimes comes off as such. And presentation alone, I think that's what hurt him when he was running against Trump. Is he comes off as very condescending sometimes when he speaks, even if it's not necessarily the words he's saying, it's how he presents his words. It's sometimes the verbiage he uses. And I'll tell you right now, he doesn't come off as a very Texan person. He definitely could be a conservative out of a city, like a more like kind of purple state. And I think that actually probably hurts him more, even though he is. I'm not bashing Cruz as a Texan or because I want to live. But the reality of the situation is he doesn't always fit the mold that he should be fitting. And then sometimes he's absolutely incredible.
Yeah.
And it's hard. Like I said, I support Ted Cruz. I like Ted Cruz. I don't think he would be a president anyhow. He doesn't have that certain je ne sais quoi. So there's something just missing out of his puzzle. There's a piece gone, but I think he's great where he is. I think he would be a great attorney general. There's a lot of other places that I could see him do fantastically but I just don't think he'd ever be a president.
He clerked for SCOTUS, if I'm not mistaken.
Correct.
So,
well,
the dude's got the smarts.
I would love to see Trump appoint him to the Supreme Court.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah,
that would be fantastic. Yeah, he clerked for Scalia.
Oh, okay. Oh, shit. Better yet. Can't get much better than that. And the whole thing about Scalia doesn't.
Not starting that tonight. We're not starting that tonight.
Never.
We are not getting into that. No.
Never sat really well with me.
We're not getting into it. Just stop. Just stop. We don't have 3 hours left.
Yeah, we don't have time to get into that. I know where you're going with it.
Yeah, as soon as you said it, no.
Okay, well, I'm just about ready to be done. I got a couple more names for. Okay, no, I don't.
Oh man.
Okay, we're stopping the show. So I want to say ever so kindly thanks tonight to my guest, Sackhead SHAUN, host Edge of Liberty, and also to Big Earl Jackson of Mission Ready Men, and also to Lonnie Poindexter of Lion Chasers Radio. Thanks to every one of you guys. Every time I have you guys on, I have a great and a wonderful time. So thank you all ever so kindly for this. And let's see, I think that means something similar to this. So, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, thank you so kindly for being here tonight on BZ's Berserk Bobcat Saloon Radio Show. I am BZ. Thanks, muy macho thanks to Sackhead SHAUN, Edge of Liberty, to Big Earl Jackson, Mission Ready Men, to Lonnie Poindexter, Lion Chasers, and also EBLM. We will come back with each and every one of those wonderful individuals. Let me turn this down just a hair. And thanks to everybody for being in chat. Thanks to Sean Stroich for being in chat. All the other people that were in chat, because we disseminated this podcast far and wide and live and all that kind of good stuff. So go to shrmedia.com. shrmedia.com. Our new website has been updated, refreshed, cleaned out. We even pulled open the cabinets. We put new lining in the cabinets. It's a great place to go, shrmedia.com. Conservative media, done right. I'm BZ, and I say, hey, come and see what's in store for me to you on Thursday night.
quiet down now and get some sleep.
Good night, everybody.
Good night, Mama. Good night, Ben. Good night, everyone.
Good night, Mama. Good night, Daddy.
Good night, children. Good night, Dad. Good night, Elizabeth.
Good night, John Boy. Good night, Jim Bob. Good night, Jim Bob.
Good night, Jim Bob.
What's going on? I was asleep. What's everybody doing?
Good night,
Good night, Jim Bob.
Good night, and good luck.